Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone from across the racing world. Today, it's the ClubSport Series, powered by DGFX. As today, it's racing for round number 2 at Laguna, Seca. Good evening, I'm Justin Prince. Alongside of the booth tonight will be Nolan Rempel. Hugo Wee will be in the production seat for tonight's action here at WeatherTech Laguna, Seca. It's the second round of the season, and teams are trying to carry the momentum from the previous round for the Daytona 2.4, and now it's the matter of who can keep things up in the early going of the season and try and carry the momentum. As you look at your point standings, SimRC.de Strawberry came away with the victory in the prototype class, with SORC Racing Orange finishing off in second. All 10 drivers ended up finishing off in the running order for the end of the race. The remaining two drivers in the class did not meet the minimum laps required for the field as you look for the rest of those point standings. Teams such as NAP Racing for the Sports Club side try and carry the momentum along with Bombshell Motorsports. As you see on your screen, the points very tight up at the top of the standings coming into today's action, along with many drivers trying to make sure they make it to the finish as well in that said class. For the ClubSport side, it's GT Tempo Racing looking to carry the momentum along with some of their team counterparts from that sports class. The question is, who's going to come up on today to try and come away on the top step of the podium and come away with a victory today? I'll bring in my partner Nolan now into the action for today. Of course, a very challenging racetrack for the second round of the season here, Nolan.
Oh, absolutely. WeatherTech Raceway, it's definitely probably one of the most difficult tracks in all of North America to master, especially that corner right up there at the top of your screen right there. It's infamously known as the corkscrew, and I feel like we're going to be seeing quite a few incidents occurring in there. It's probably one of the most difficult corners in all of motorsports to get right just because of the nature of the corner, the steep drop. There's a lot of elevation change at this track as well. You go up the hill and then you just drop down so quickly in corners such as the corkscrew. I feel like the Radicals could actually find themselves having quite a bit of difficulty through corners such as turn 6 and of course through the corkscrew today.
Absolutely. You see some more of those sports standings now coming into today, of course, with that class. As talked about, GT Tempo Racing is on top of the said standings for that said class, with the World of Sim Racing in second. Bombshell Motorsports has their counterpart for the class inside the top 3. But at this point, a lot of drivers trying to carry the momentum, try and move their way forward here. A 2-hour and 25-minute race. Of course, for those that are tuning in after seeing what happened from the first round, of course, some differences you might see from different kinds of racing, of course, especially with the potential driver swaps we'll see throughout today's action as you see your schedule. 5 rounds for the season from January through May.
Oh, we're still at round number 2, so we are still very early in the season, so still plenty of time for these drivers to make something work. Though I do think that this race is going to be much more chaotic than what we saw at Daytona International Raceway, just because of the nature of the track, how much more difficult it is to get a pass done. There really isn't a whole lot of optimal passing zones that are just placed around the track. It's somewhat difficult to be able to successfully make a pass done unless you're, of course, going right down into turn number 2, the Andretti hairpin, very infamously named as well.
Indeed, right now you see some of the drivers coming off the racetrack. They are just finishing up group qualifying, in fact, right now for the MX-5 class on the racetrack. Already the times have been recorded for the R2 classes for the prototypes and the sport class. Some drivers still haven't recorded a time, and they've got maybe a couple minutes to do so at the max as you're looking on board with SimSport News Racing, powered by iZone Green. As you see on the left side on board, on the right side you see the outside view as he tries to approach the corkscrew. They got 2 minutes to complete their lap times and try and record as much the best pace they can if you're on the racetrack.
Qualifying can be so crucial, especially at a track such as this, just because of how difficult it is. You really want to start as far up the field as you possibly can, because if you can get a good run off these first couple corners, you're going to be home free for a good portion of the race until the field starts to thin out, things start to settle down, everybody begins to find their rhythm. But getting a good qualifying time can be absolutely vital at a track such as Laguna Seca.
And Jacob Toff's behind the wheel for his machine. One of 2 drivers left on the racetrack. Let's see if he can record a time on attempt number 12 as he comes across the start-finish line. No. Once again, even though it was a 1:39.2, he did have apparent incident points that would have put him towards the middle part of the group. You see the qualifying time so far on the board for this session overall today. As SimRC.de Strawberry on top of the prototype class, Bombshell Motorsports once again on top of their class right now for their machines, while on top of the board for the MX-5s, as you see, is Torque Freak Racing Megates over top Bombshell Motorsports, the world of sim racing inside the top 3 for that said class. So a lot of the same competitors so far, Nolan, in qualifying at least, at the top of the board in this session today.
Yeah, you got a very fair point there, especially with drivers like those running for SimRC.de Strawberry and Graphite Racing. We saw those 2 drivers swap positions for the lead a couple of times at Daytona, and eventually that SimRC.de Strawberry machine did end up coming away with a 1-minute gap by the end of the race. So extremely great race by them. So I'm seriously hoping that they'll be able to put on a similar show today.
Absolutely. The timer reaches 0 for the rest of the drivers on the track. Let's take a look at your starting grid for today's action here from WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna, Seca. Start things off with the Porsche class. The SimRC.de Strawberry machine starts on the pole, with Graphite Racing starts on the outside. Nimble Racing starts in row 2 with SK Motorsports, rounding out the top 4. While V Apex Racing Group Purple in WR Racing's B machine starts off in 6th. SORC Racing Orange in V Apex Racing Group Blue starts 7th and 8th, while WR Racing ends off the class in the 9th spot. Meanwhile, in the following class afterwards, the drivers for the Porsches inside the machines for the Sport class will get ready from 10th on back. It'll be Bombshell Motorsports on the pole in the number 186 with a 124.5. 2/10 back is Porsche Basel by Sork Ren Sport. Nab Racing starts in row 2 with Enigma ClubSport Porsche in the 4th spot, with Hugh Just Blue in 14th overall. Gold Racing Team White starts off in 15th overall in the field, with Team Vikings Van Hall starting off in 7th in their class. While German Disaster Racing hopes to not have a disaster inside the top 10, while Slow Racing Team and Hugh Just Gold start inside the top 10. Behind them is that Sim Sport News Racing machine starting alongside Fischer Motorsport, with Real Pixar Motorsport and Torque Racing's Avon Rise looking to rise to the occasion near the back of the field today. Real Pixar's number 3 machine starts off behind them, with the German Sim Racing Blue and Friends machines rounding up the 16 drivers in the sports class today. While for the club side, as you see the rest of your drivers come through, 3 drivers, did not record times in the class. As you see, some of them the German sim racing machines along with Racecraft Esports in that group. Meanwhile, for the club side, Torque Freak Racing Megates starts off in the pole for the class, while Bombshell Motorsports starts on the outside. Relative Sim Racing Team and Ava Vervatic starts off alongside them, with the World of Sim Racing's junior team starting 31st overall on the track. They're in the 5th spot overall today in that club's class, while Team Viking Cycler starts off alongside them. The Gold Racing Team starts alongside the Disabled Motorsport Squad. GT Tempo Racing, the points leaders coming into today, got some bad news coming into today. Some of their drivers under the weather, they will not be running for points today. They'll be starting in 9th, while LTP Racing starts alongside them. Real Pixel Motorsports number 1 machine, the 299 on the track, starts off at the end of the time recorded times. While SimSport News Racing, powered by iZone Green, did not record a time, along with German Sim Racing Orange, BL Racing in 7 stars fast for the class. As you see the rest of those drivers cycle on through. Before we get underway, one thing to note, the drivers for the prototype class have been told they have to switch sides of the track for when they reach the green flag. But other than that, today could be an absolutely intense race. You talked about it a little bit before, the difficulty to pass. It's going to be key that you don't make a mistake in this race all day long here, Nolan.
Absolutely. This is one of those tracks where it is extremely unforgiving. You got next to no grip when you touch the grass and through corners like turn 6. If you go off, you're most likely going to be finding yourself in a tire barrier, especially if you're driving one of these Porsches or the Radicals, just because they carry so much speed through there. If you're in a Mazda, you might be able to recover yourself. It is going to be extremely difficult for quite a lot of these drivers, especially in the faster classes.
Right now, they're working their way through the corkscrew. The prototypes are at this point. Once again, the prototype class coming in today with 9 drivers recording times as they work their way down the hill. Your quick thoughts before we take the green flag.
Just prepare for a bit of a messy start is all I can say. That's the only thing that I am thinking is going to happen here.
And let's see if they avoid a messy start as they work their way through towards turn number 11. Pace car drops its way into the tight pit entry. Lucas Dolzer starts on the left side. Frank Osterhaus starts on the right side. As they approach the restart zone, green flag waves. We're underway here for round number 2 of the ClubSport Series season at Laguna, Seca. A clean start for the prototypes as they work their way up towards the hill into the Andretti hairpin. Let's see who tries to outbrake the air. Dolzer stays on the inside as he slides up and keeps P number 1. Meanwhile, coming up through the grid now is the Porsches coming on by, with Kurt Krum having a heck of a start. Already single file and away with about 2 car length.
Moving back to the Mazda field, just across the start-finish line now. We've also got a couple of fights going on down through the field as well as they come down for the Andretti hairpin. Torque Freak Racing almost getting the back bumper chopped off of Bombshell Motorsports. They throttle themselves out of the Andretti hairpin. Great start from Torque Freak Racing Megas to get off of the line with a fantastic start, managing to hold on to first place.
And a lot of drivers already shuffling in that class. Disabled Motorsports' Daniel Holtzel dived it on in and gained a couple spots, in fact, to the Andretti hairpin as the MX-5s worked their way to the first part of the racetrack right now. Already everyone's spaced out by at least 20 car lengths each group at this point. As you look at the middle group of the MX-5s, trouble though in the Porsches. Andrea Servitosa has been wrecked inside the corkscrew. Multiple drivers are spinning through the gravel. That's one of the huge ass machines that's inside the gravel. A couple more drivers into the track. Already trouble in the Porsche class.
That's the one thing that huge ass team did not want to see. They had so much difficulties at Daytona, and unfortunately the difficulties followed them right through to WeatherTech Raceway, coming up the hill for the corkscrew. How did this start? Was there contact? It looked like he got a little light, and then there was contact indeed going into the corkscrew.
That is David Haynes that got spun around with the contact all the way around in a 180, and not the place you want to be stopped, especially down a hill backwards.
It's such a blind corner as well, so somebody comes flying through the corner there and they end up going off. You're going to be facing a head-on collision from them, and that'll just put you completely out of the race in its entirety. So quite lucky that more cars didn't go off, because that honestly could have been a much bigger incident than it was.
Absolutely. Both drivers continue on driving, but losing a ton of time with said incident at this point. As you look right now at the clock, 2:22:30 to go. Once again, a 2-hour, 25-minute race today. Estimated lap distance for the Porsches, more than 100 lap distance. For today, for the prototype, they're estimated to reach 106 laps around the circuit, while the MX-5s are expected to make it just 87 laps around. Of course, different fuel strategies, different paces to think about as you see those Porsches work their way into the Andretti hairpin into turn 2 as you look on board from the middle of the pack.
The different fuel strategies could definitely play a huge factor into these different classes, especially where they could come out in relation to the field, because one of the things you never want to do when you're going for fuels, especially at a track like this, is come out in the middle of traffic, because it's difficult enough to try to fight your way through your own class. And you have to work your way through lap traffic while coming out of the pits on cold tires. It's probably one of the worst scenarios you can have. So thankfully, these first couple corners are much, much wider and more easy to negotiate than turns like what are coming up here with turn 6 and the corkscrew and all the rest of the complexity final half of the track, really.
Absolutely. You see on board on the left side is the outside view, on the right side is the onboard view for WR Racing's B machine. That is Stephen Nobles, who is trying to catch up for a battle for 4th. Kyle Sorchards in 4th. Wayne Wortley up front of them in the 3rd spot. as he loses some speed through the exit coming out of that corkscrew. Of course, you want to be on that inside line coming out of the corkscrew through turn number 5. Did so there, as they currently work in a 4-car train, third all the way back to 6th overall on the track today.
Yep, the 4-car train definitely going to be forming themselves up here. We actually already have the leaders beginning to approach the back markers for that Mazda class, so that did not take long at all for the leaders to begin to catch lap traffic. Lucas Dolzer will be catching that lap traffic, and if not in this lap, definitely the next one, to say the least.
I was just about to mention that because the pace difference is massive. About 20 seconds in qualifying alone. Last time by, Dolzer ran a 1:19. The last car on track for the class ran a 1:40. It's going to be Wolfgang Wilbenauer going to have to deal with them first. Real Pixel Motorsport way sliding around, nearly went off into the gravel as Dolzer gets on by. Matthew Richardson moves to the right side meanwhile, and this is where it gets dicey if you're a prototype with a massive speed difference here today.
We can already see the Mazda begin to check up that little 4-car train that we had back there in the back as they split them coming out of the corkscrew. Just barely managed to get by, and there's been contact between the Mazda and the Radical. Ross Banfield and Wolfgang Wildenauer both going around for Real Pixel Motorsport and VFX Racing Group Purple.
Now let's take a look at the race spot replay to see what just happened as Banfield had to shuffle his way through traffic. They had to split that MX-5 too before the contact that was made, working their way through turn 9 towards turn 10.
Very lucky for the extra runoff that they have there on the exit of turn number 9. That really saved the skin of both those drivers, or they would have gone spearing off into one of the tire walls. Again, lucky that it happened, and Ross Banfield has just spun again in the Andretti hairpin, this time all on his own. Got loose under braking and just overcorrected it just a little bit.
And now it's starting to snowball. He's back to 9th in the class, make it 8th, pardon me, as continuing to drive through said traffic is every single prototype of these Radicals. It's going to get absolutely dicey at this point. Most of the lead cars have made it through a majority, in fact, all of the MX-5s already. However, Thor 6 on back still dicing their way through on the left side of the track coming into the corkscrew.
At the corkscrew and turn 6 are probably the areas where you just never want to come up on lap traffic if you're a Radical, just because of how difficult it is to try to maneuver your way around these slower cars, because there really is no second line through there that you can take. You got to fall in line, you got to slow up to their speed, which can create a lot of checkups, and that's actually why we had all of that contact going on that caused that first multi-class crash on the exit of turn 9.
Gina Quinteller moves out of the way for Torque Freak Racing Maggots as 2 prototypes move to his left. That was Demise Tigachar moving along with Andy Banfield once more. As you look back now at the Porsches, the battle for 6 starting to heat up. A lot of the drivers in this class now starting to get bumper to bumper themselves right now, as you see in this battle.
Now, this is where it's going to get tight, is when these battles start to all tighten up and close in on each other. Tor Andres Bervin trying to hunt down Tobias Ritt for German Disaster Racing, while also trying to fend off Slow Racing Team right behind them. So he's got himself a little bit of work to do if he's going to get by Tobias Ritt here. If he can make that move, though, coming into the Andretti hairpin, not close enough to do it this time around. If you can make a move pass coming into the Andretti hairpin, you're going to have yourself a very easy time trying to get the spot by from there on out, as now the Porsches are also beginning to catch the lap traffic.
Tobias Ritt trying to use the MX-5 of Willenheimer as a pick, as that's going to force Tor Andres Bervin up towards the gravel. Thomas Ertzen also moves on by, but you've seen he used him as a pick, Tobias Ritt. That gained him an extra couple car lengths on Bervin, along with Ertzen, as you follow on board with Ertzen, as he tries to get now 6th in the class all of a sudden.
And that is going to be one of the things that we're going to be seeing a lot throughout the course of this race. The Porsches and the Radicals using this slower traffic here as a pick, as poor Anders Bervin goes off just a little bit. That allows Thomas Ertzen to close right in on him. Not quite close enough to make a move coming into the corkscrew. He's going to have to back out of it. But it just shows you how if you go off here just a little bit, it can cost you so much time.
Absolutely right now. You look for the bumper cam now for Slow Racing Team. not looking slow in terms of pace. We have had a warning given on the racetrack, and it's been given to the number 138 machine. That is huge ass blue for that contact we've seen in the corkscrew on lap 1 for avoidable contact coming into the corkscrew. That was when we've seen him, both of those two drivers, him making contact with the driver in front of him in, I believe that was one of the German sim racing machines, pardon me. Either way, warning for one of the huge ass machines, the huge ass blue machine.
Again, not the start to the day that those huge ass machines wanted. It's probably the last way they wanted to start off their day with, was with another spin. They had so much heartache at Daytona trying to work their way through various incidents, and I believe there was also penalties served out here or there to those drivers as well. And they wanted to come away and come to WeatherTech looking for a bit of a fresh start, hoping to make a bit better of a move, but just not able to get clear of their luck. Fight for the lead going on now in your Mazda class between Torque Freak Racing Megates and World of Sim Racing.
And this is getting extremely tight because you see right now, they're away from traffic for now. The problem is they got a whole mess of Porsches now about to swallow them coming from their respective class. Daniel Jerez, Jan trying to chase down Quintauer. Quintauer currently on the lead. They're going to have to deal with Curtis Crum leading his way towards the right side this time. Inside the Porsche class, they zoom right on by as they move out of the way. And this is going to hamper their ability to try and make a pass at this point when you have all these drivers trying to move on by as lap traffic.
Daniel Jerez actually got a good, he actually lucked out on that deal because he was able to take a much wider line coming into the corner than Quintelier was, but that actually allows him to get a lot more speed coming through the corner as well, because Quintelier had to take a tighter line to avoid the Porsches.
And speaking of some of this traffic, Jan-Philipp Wayne was spun around in the last corner last time by. This was out of turn number 11 for lap 7 into lap number 8 for him. And you're going to see why. More MX-5 traffic causes a checkup. And hello, you get spun around at another blind corner.
Oh boy, I took a look at that white and green Porsche that flew by him on his right side. That was just a tad close for comfort, I feel, for both of those drivers. As once again, this lead battle for your Mazda field, it's going to get hampered by all of these Porsches trying to find their way past. You got your battle for 4th place that's beginning to pick up right behind them as well. And here comes Tom Anders Berven trying to make a move on Tobias Ritt, but has to check up for Daniel Jerez in that Mazda. He's really close on the back bumper. Can he make something coming into the last corner? Ritt drives it indeed, trying to get around Quintelier. Quintelier leaving him the room he needs, but not quite allowing him to get by. And that battle for 4th is going to go on by. Looks like we're going to have a pass for 5th.
And that broke up the MX-5 battle, but side by side for Ertzen on the left side. On the right side, once again, is Berven inside the traffic. Gonna make the pass stick. Crossover move, though, coming out of the Andretti hairpin, working their way down to turn 3. Ertzen going the preferred line. As Team Vikings can't take advantage on the crossover attempt, they fall back a position. And now Huge Ass Gold now tries to pass by them as they join this battle.
Where Anders Berven did try to go for the over and under, but the thing about doing that in the Andretti hairpin, it is very easy to begin to initiate it. It's so hard, though, to actually be able to pull it off just because of turn number 3 that comes up right afterwards. It's so hard. You pretty much have to clear them by the time you reach turn 3, or it's just going to be for nothing, because you got turn 3, they got turn 4, but after that, both of those are, of course, right-hand turns, meaning that you're going to be on a less than optimal line if you try to go for that over-under.
And now, guess who's reached the Porsches and the MX-5s again? Lucas Dolzer and the rest of the prototypes are now dicing their way through in the corkscrew as the leads come on down. Mid-crash behind them, though. Eric Bordas has been spun into the gravel trap. Also, SK Motorsports for one of the prototypes has crashed coming into the corkscrew. 2 separate incidents as the traffic coincided.
So a big mess of different incidents that just kind of pile up into one. We're going to take a look at that SK Motorsports incident first. So this is coming out of turn 6. He actually got loose coming off of turn number 6, trying to get up the hill. As I said, the downforce for those cars pushing him into the ground and just sending him right around. Looking now to Eric Bourdieu, Bourdois coming through turn 6 just now. And it looks like he just got the back end loose coming up over the hill towards the braking zone. Braked just a little too suddenly and sent that car into the concrete and into the tire wall. Into the gravel trap.
I think he just about hit that concrete wall, though the car just straight up shot to the right. Normally you don't see it that sharply when you hit the brakes, though, especially even when there's lockup. As you look to the battle now for eighth with Hugh Jass Gold, with Enigma ClubSport Porsche behind them. That's something that can get pretty dicey at this kind of a situation at this point, at this kind of a track where you shoot to the right, your car could be gone even with some of the runoff space.
Absolutely, and again, it goes back to the point that I've been saying, how a lot of these faster cars, they really have to be careful in that braking zone for the corkscrew, just because you're going to overford that braking zone, and it begins just as you reach the crest of that hill, so you have to be very, very careful, because the car can get really unsettled as you go over the lip of that hill, and if you make too many sudden movements with your car in that braking zone, it's just going to send you right around, as we saw just a few moments ago.
And at this point, with all these things going on, of course, we're approaching just 20 minutes into the race. When do you feel is going to be the pit window for today's race? How long can these said drivers make it on fuel as Fowlset, tries to deal with the dive bomb from Sir Totes behind?
It's very unpredictable, I feel, at this point in time. We've already had a couple of Miatas that have come and gone in the pits, but that's most likely to repair damage and not necessarily go for a forward tire and fuel window stop. I feel it's just so unpredictable. There really is no way to be able to tell where the fuel window is going to be at this point in time.
Yeah, at this point, that's kind of part of why I was going to ask as well. If you're in traffic, how does that, of course, affect the window as you see some of the prototype traffic working their way through some more of the Porsches once more?
That is, of course, Lucas Dolzer that's actually lost out on the lead to Graphite Racing.
And that was through some of the traffic, I believe. In fact, yes, indeed, because he was gaining up through all this traffic. Let's look at how he got the job done. And this would be a ways back. If we can go back to live action, he just lost it back because through turn number 11, made contact with a Porsche with Lucas Dolzer retaking the lead. So Graphite Racing falls on back to second once more.
Tor Anders Bervin got two wheels into the dirt, entering the corner. He spun sideways on his own and just barely clipped Graphite Racing. No damage to that Radical. He did lose out on the lead to Lucas Dolzer for SimRC.de Strawberry. So already multiple incidents involving the leaders for your cars. Great job by Frank Osterwitz for Graphite Racing to manage to keep that car pointed in a straight line. Great car control for Graphite Racing.
And you know how SimRC.de lost the lead? 2 laps prior, they did the same. They ended up overshooting turn 11. That's how Graphite Racing took the lead. Then Graphite Racing makes a mistake of their own. They fall back to second after gaining so much time back over the period of the past 5 laps after being so far back at one point with all this traffic. Just mistakes back and forth all of a sudden here, Nolan.
Well, it is very hard to kind of focus on your own line, especially if you're in the Radicals or the Porsche field, especially if you're in the Porsches, actually, because you're trying to let all of these faster cars through, you're trying to pass all of these slower cars that are with the Mazda class, but at the same time, you're also trying to fight for position in your own class as well. So it can be very, very tricky to be able to judge how to make your line work, and that's something that we're going to be seeing happen on and off all throughout the race. This race is going to be drivers in this race are going to be much more prone to mistakes than they are at Daytona, just because of how different the characteristics of the two tracks are.
You're still on board with Frank Osterhaus, meanwhile, in the second spot overall in the class and overall in the racetrack. As now, he's got clean space for now to Lucas Dolzer. Of course, still very early on, fell as far back now to 2 seconds after being just 8/10 back last time by. So all of a sudden, those mistakes proving costly as you look back to where SK Motorsports was and look back as well to the Apex Racing Group Purple. They're battling amongst teammates inside the prototype class for 7th overall in the racetrack.
7th overall in the racetrack. This is again where things could begin to pick up a little bit, is with these little teammate battles here or there as well. Because how do you work your way through a battle if you're trying to fight against your own teammate? That's something Ross Banfield's really going to have to be careful of when Andy Banfield catches right up to him. And it could create a bit of an interesting little scenario, especially if they end up making contact with each other.
For sure right now, and you look as well, another battle forming up for 3rd spot on the racetrack. Nimble Racing in front, trying to pull away from WR Racing B and Stefan Nobes with Wayne Wortley holding on inside coming into the Andretti hairpin. And all of a sudden, they're also starting to gain time a little bit here and there with Osterhaus. Last time by, they were a bit slower on the track by about a second. However, if they get more mistakes, then they move up to potentially 2nd. As you see right now, the difference between the two of them in terms of themselves, 0.6 of a second, the gap for the 3rd and 4th spots on the racetrack as they pass on by GT Temple Racing that's been having a rough day.
One of the other reasons as to why they're gaining time to Graphite Racing and SimRC Dundee Strawberry is because both of those drivers have, of course, caught the live traffic again, and now Nimble Racing and WR Racing B trying to throttle their way through that same traffic.
As you see the said traffic right now, some trouble might be coming up the hill. GT Temple Racing lost control right in front of traffic heading into the corkscrew as Nimble Racing, WR Racing B go on by. And you might notice there's some front-end damage. GT Temple Racing having Simon Estes on their own for the race today has not worked out for them, as you see now back to the battle for 3rd spot once more with Nimble Racing using Ava Verbatic as a pick.
Going back to our point about how we're going to be seeing these drivers using each other as picks as the race goes on, we're going to keep coming back to that as the race goes on. We've already seen it so often. Big lockup from Wayne Wortley going into the Andretti hairpin.
And the battle for the prototype lead starting to get dicey too, as everyone's being used as picks. Both the MX-5s and the Porsches being used as picks. Big time differences in speed. Dolzer pulls on away. Osterhaus tried to dive bomb one of the MX-5s because he's seen the possible window. Now, there are at least a car difference between one another because of this traffic, as now they reach the MX-5 battle for the lead, with Quinteller still leading, with Juan still in 2nd, and Juan now going to lose time because of all this traffic once more, as we have a stop-and-go penalty issued now to the 138 Huge Ass Blue for contact on lap 8.
Oh dear. Again, going back to our point about it seems like there's almost a curse being put on that Huge Ass Blue machine as well. It's the one thing they didn't want to have happen to them when they came into this race today, was to receive penalties or be involved in incidents where there's a big lockup. Ostra, who is going into the last corner in the back end, steps out as well, coming out of turn 11, really trying to get the power down to catch Lucas Dolzer for that SimRC Strawberry machine.
Trouble, turn 11, Bass and pile up in the exit of turn 11. Rene Kirchhoff wrecked. Kyle Hare tied up, the race leader formerly for the MX-5s. A massive pile up as Ren Kirchhoff can't get moving. This might be a yellow flag. Another incident, another MX-5 flips upside down, as you see how this all just stacked up on the replay.
Oh my goodness, yes, another multi-class incident between the Porsche trying to get around a Miata, and that created a form of a roadblock to all these guys that are trying to avoid this incident. You have a massive trouble with cars trying to get around them. Could that potentially bring out a virtual safety car? That is something new that we're seeing in the ClubSport Series. We didn't have one ever at Daytona. It doesn't look like we're going to be having one here, though, either.
And that is Daniel Holtzel for Disabled Motorsport, who is having a top 10 run flipped upside down by one of the huge ass machines that had nowhere to go. The incident is cleared up, but at least 6-7 drivers getting damage in that incident. Porsche Basel getting the worst of it, of course, being stuck there for half a lap essentially, falling all the way back to 12 and losing 12 to Jad Philip Winged for Real Pixel Motorsports number 3 machine.
We actually saw that Real Pixel Motorsport machine give. He actually received a little bit of a punt from behind as well when he was trying to get that position in the Andretti hairpin. Of course, that was directly after that incident coming off of turn 11. So a little bit of a shot there as well from Jan-Philipp Weed, who was in a real hurry to get out of that whole scenario. And of course, Reed Kirchhoff for Porsche Basel by Sword Rennsport Esports going to be trying to fight back to get that position back.
And Hugh Jazz Blue ducking into the pits because of all the damage they suffered on the machine.
Oh, big trouble!
And you see it's that Porsche. It's the Porsche Basel machine hitting the wall. Sword Rennsport Esports entry has hit the tire barrier and heading straight to the pits. So René Kirchhoff, major trouble after that incident a couple laps ago, now ducks on in.
He turned in way too early. The car got loose. There's that little sausage curve on the inside of turn 10. He hopped right over that, caught massive air, just barely managed to keep it out of the tire wall, but that's going to be big damage, most likely on the suspension for that car.
And let's look on board as he takes turn 9 wide first off, takes a tighter entry into 10, and then bam, pinballs, bounces his way to like a pogo stick towards the tires, and then has to work his way to the pits. So that incident after turn 11 definitely broke the suspension based on how he turned either late or early in both of those corners.
Absolutely. Again, going back to our point about how drivers just don't want to have this happen to them, it's going to keep happening as time goes on. And that's something we never really discussed, is those sausage curves on the inside of the track. This will give you a really good look at this right there. Sends that car flying into the gravel trap. Those sausage curves can really be killer to a car. They could really damage the suspension on the underside of the car or other. I've actually gotten meatball flags from hitting those sausage curves myself, and I know for a fact I'm not the only driver. Simon Edge just getting really loose for GT Tempo Racing as well, coming off of turn number 6, managing to keep that under control as he was trying to let the race leader through.
And you see that machine currently 8th, by the way, in the MX-5, despite basically being demolished at this point with the front bumper spinning 360s a couple times. But as well, other drivers at this point, it's been an absolutely wild one. As this has all been going on, Fischer Motorsport was punted before. They've just been nearly punted again, as you see a prototype having to go to the gravel to avoid GT Tempo Racing. So all of a sudden, everything and then some has broken loose in this race.
Drivers are definitely not being as polite as we saw at Daytona. This is a much more chaotic race. This is going to be an understatement, really. We've already had probably the same amount of incidents. We had more contact between the two prototypes, and we've just seen one of the Mazdas, Fabian Dance, go off, and he has actually towed that car back to the pits.
And let's take a look at the replay of what just happened. Remember, they flipped upside down. They were allowed out of the pits after 5 minutes. And of course, car's not going to handle well when you flip upside down and only have a couple minutes repairs.
And it looks like their receive throughput dropped as well, so they were actually disconnected for network issues. So that is one of the other things that has absolutely killed their race. Looking back to your fight for 3rd place overall, though, less than 2 tenths working their way through. More Mazdas coming up towards the corkscrew. Something's got to give here eventually. They cannot. You got to be really careful when you're racing so aggressively with so much traffic. That's such a difficult part of the racetrack.
Heads up in terms of penalty news, a warning was given to the 193 machine for contact. Again, that is Enigma ClubSport, who made contact on lap 7 coming out of turn 11. That was with Fischer Motorsport, as we got contact again out of turn 11. More chaos once more as Nimble Racing gets sent around. They lose 3rd spot, and another replay for another chaotic corner.
They tried to drive it in under a Porsche. The problem was that was a dive bomb, and a bit of a reckless one at that. They just collided with the rear end of Eric Bordas for SimSport News Racing, powered by iZone Black. It was a bit of a clumsy move, really, from Nimble Racing, trying to go for a gap that really was not there. Came in with way too much speed.
You move back to 5th for a second, but Nimble Racing might have a problem themselves, because when they were coming into the Andretti hairpin, guess what they collected? A cone. Yes, that is a cone stuck underneath the car, and it finally falls off. That, of course, makes it difficult to focus and drive properly when you have a cone wedged underneath your splitter.
especially if your car is so low to the ground, and you know it kind of blocks a good portion of your view, working his way around. Yet another Miata. Wade Wortley, of course, managing to get that cone all sorted out with. It's a bit of a curious incident overall. He really is locking up the brakes big time coming into the corkscrew every single time I've seen him go in there. I've seen smoke coming from under those tires. That's something he's going to have to watch for as well, because if you keep doing that, you're just going to shred laps and laps off of your tires.
As you can tell, the race lead has shuffled around and then some a couple times. Sim Racing D Strawberry still leads for the prototypes. Bombshell Motorsports has been one of the cleanest Porsches in this race and leads the class. World of Sim Racing, after that incident with all the MX-5s, is currently in the race lead as Wortley has pulled himself into the pits, as you might have noticed a moment ago, for his team. So more drivers having issues throughout the race today. As you see some of the space for some of the drivers. Huge ass blue, meanwhile, for the prototypes. Porsches, rather, is in, but the prototypes work through traffic once more.
This is definitely heating up to be one of the most interesting races I've ever had, to say the least. We've already had several drivers that have been pulled off due to several incidents. Some of them have been for network issues, and it looks like Wortley might have just thrown in the towel because he just brought it right in. He didn't have a penalty, nothing. He just pulled it off and then towed it back, so he might have thrown in the towel for the race. Kyle Streichar still working for SK Motorsports to catch up to Dimas Tigchalar for SROC Racing Orange down through turn 6 once more as they approach another badly beaten up Porsche.
And David Haynes has been just given a black flag by race control. That is again for Huge Ass Blue for the contact on lap 1 of the race in the Porsches. So another driver just given a penalty. Meanwhile, you see the lap times. You see how much changes just by reaching lap traffic, and depending on which type you reach. You can swing back a full second away, gain time. Then you can lose it just as simple as just reaching a couple MX-5s in a row in a bad spot.
Well, exactly, and if I was a Radical, I'd actually prefer to catch one of the Mazdas than one of the Porsches, because the Mazdas you can work with in a matter of less than a second if you're on a long straight, such as this run down to the Andretti hairpin, and it makes it so easy for them to deal with. Even in corners, they're easy to deal with. You get to a Porsche, though, when they're a bit closer to you, you have to spend a much longer amount of time around them, which could really affect things. We got another cone stuck on another car. Ross Banfield now for VFX Racing Group Purple. We got more trouble.
And that is Sork Racing Orange spinning. That is Dennis Taudroir spinning into the dirt once more. That was in that battle you've seen on screen. And it looks like another case where a driver overruns the corner, hits the dirt, they hook straight to the right. He falls back to 6th.
And that car was really unsettled going into the corner as well. Very close call for SK Motorsports, who just barely managed to squeak through there without making contact. So that will allow them to pick up 4th place in class now. And of course, more bad luck from more drivers. And I don't even think we haven't even approached, we're not even close to the halfway point yet in this race.
It's only been 36 minutes since the drivers have pulled off the front stretch to the pit lane. Through all of this has been going on, World of Sim Racing's main team and their junior equivalent have turned into a 1-2 run, basically, taking advantage of the incident for Torque Freak Racing Maggots to lead the MX-5 class right now as they get lapped by Porsches, and that Torque Freak Racing machine is in the grass. Oh boy.
Another incident coming out of this time turn number 9. Once more overcooked the corner, got the right sides onto the grass, and just sends it right off it. This time he did make very slight contact with that tire barrier.
And that drops him out of the top 3. So as you can tell, madness and then some for the second round of the ClubSport Series, powered by GTFX today, as you look back to 5th for the MX-5s. That is LTP Racing, who's starting near the back, mind you, taking advantage of mistakes to 5th spot. Team Vikings wants to try and get into the top 5 as they nearly dive bomb it inside, as this is slowly turning into yet another tight battle. And every time we've seen a tight battle, trouble happens, it seems, today.
And it just about happened again as Andrew Fawcett tries to get around LTP Racing. That Mazda running just a little wide on the exit of the corner, manages to keep it on the grass. As there goes your race leader, threading the needle between these 3 Mazdas who tried to make way for him. struggling to get through. It's definitely a much more of an interesting race in terms of incidents, to say the least, than our race at Daytona. I've pretty much lost track as to who is where on track at this point, because there's just been so much shuffling going on, so many spins everywhere. It's hard to keep track of everything that's going on at once.
Ross Banfield is in for the Porsche, for the prototypes rather, as you can see the Gold Racing team joining into the battle. So now we've seen multiple drivers duck their way into the pits the past few laps here and there. Here off and on, the question is, with all this madness going on, we've lost track to where, when is this pit window going to open? It's to the point where so many drivers are off cycle. It's I think absolutely one of the wildest races I think we've ever seen in a while.
I honestly don't even think there is a concise pit window at this point, just because people are going to have to come in on their own time to work out tires, work out fuel, work out damage as well. So there really is no concise, definite pit window anymore that these drivers are going to be coming into. I feel like everybody's just going to be trying to come in on their own time. One thing that we actually never really discussed a whole lot during this race, there isn't a big drafting zone like there is at Daytona. So this is usually all an acceleration and braking power to get around drivers. You can't really use the draft here at all just because the straights are just too short.
James Ewan's now into the pits now for Torque Freak Racing's Avon Rice machine. So one of the Porsches now ducks into the said pits now. So slowly but surely, some more drivers are coming in for their pit stops now as the race for now calms down. They're 14th in the class for the time being. So far in the race, there has just been under 10 drivers that have had to come in here for repairs or for tow trucks so far today. As you see, quick stop, only 17.5 second pit stop as Ewan stays out in the car roundup.
Ewens will, of course, be trying to work some more time up in that car. And SimRC.D Strawberry, of course, in the Radicals, your race leader, looking to check out of this race. He's now pulled nearly a 10-second gap over second place. So they are looking to check out, just as they did at Daytona. A bit of a slower and more difficult time in doing so, but now that everything's beginning to kind of settle down into its own rhythm and we've cut back on the incidents and spins a little bit, I feel like they're just going to be able to run away with it from here to the end.
And you're looking at SimRC.D Strawberry. Remember, that was near bumper to bumper and actually lost the lead with some of the traffic. Since then, they pulled a 10-second lead just about on Graphite Racing. In part because they've been reaching the traffic now in the right times, but as well because in terms of the pace, they've just been able to pick it on up since those close battles. Last time by a 1:20.657. That was half a second slower, in fact, than Graphite Racing. But they've been starting to hit the traffic to the right spots at the right time to gain some time away from the rest of their competitors in the class.
It's exactly what they want to see, is there's one Porsche getting really loose ahead of them, and James Ewens, the new driver, goes clean off, manages to somehow save that.
That is the same driver, by the way, inside the car that was in the pit stop. But that is not what you want to see if your Dolzer is a spinning car coming towards your right front.
Oh boy, so somehow James Ewens managing to keep that car under control, kept it pointed the right way for the track, and Lucas Dolzer trying to work his way around the Miatas now on the outside of the Andretti hairpin. Now the question is, when Patrick Young hops into that car, Patrick Young was definitely the driver that set the pace at Daytona, and it was he who actually single-handedly put everybody except one car in the Radical field a lap down. And even that car, they had a minute gap over. So how will this shape up as they get him into the car? We have a battle for fourth in your Mazda class.
And this is Kyle Hayer, who has significant damage to that front bumper. That is Matthew Richardson, meanwhile, behind them. As you see, one of the prototypes ducking their way on by Lee Ward for WR Racing. And that's going to affect Hewer in terms of the speed, that damage rather, as Richardson just blows on by him. You look at him and look at his back bumper. That damage on Hayer's machine definitely affecting him in the 286.
Yes, the damage, of course, being a big factor for that Mazda at this time. It's, again, one of those very unfortunate types of situations. Thankfully, no steering damage. That would have made things a whole lot harder for him. but he is definitely down on power, as you can see, and maybe a bit of aerodynamic trouble as well from the bumper being kind of pushed in.
Trouble again, turn 11. James Ewens has stopped in the exit of turn 11 once more. Another driver have an incident. This time, it appears to be a major lockup off the curbs and making contact with the driver on top of it with the Team Vikings machine as he comes out of the exit. Let's take a look at the race replay to see what exactly happened to Ewens.
Oh dear, so this is of course coming down through turn number 9. That is of course, I believe that's second place in the Radical field directly ahead of them. So James Ewens ducks down through turn number 10, and what happened to cause this incident? Gets up, gets 2 tires into the dirt, just barely spins it around, and somehow everybody managing to avoid that stop Porsche. Thankfully, he was at the entrance of the corner so people could see him and give themselves a little bit more time to be able to get around him.
Moving back to the battle now for Bombshell, they are dropping like a rock all of a sudden, because behind them is Team Vikings Slifer machine with Michael S. Josephson behind the wheel of his machine. Gaining time quickly, it seems. You see 2 tenths just from the exit of turn 11 towards the Andretti hairpin, in part because of just pace alone, in part because of that damage on the front bumper. Absolutely affecting, it looks like, the speed as Ross Banfield spun out of turn 11.
Turn 11 is beginning to shape up to be the calamity corner, it would seem, as we've got another car off into turn number 11. So this is where we had a majority of our really big incidents. It's definitely going to be shaping up to be that's where we're going to be seeing probably a good portion of the incidents throughout the rest of this race, if I had to take a guess.
Yeah, and Ross Banfield didn't lose any positions after the spin, and he tries to lap one of the Team Vikings machines once more. As now, going back to where Bombshell Motorsports is, what can you do at this point of this race? You're already at just under a minute, hour and 45 minutes to go in the race, with significant damage potentially the rest of the way. What can you do? As you see there, Vikings moves on by like a Viking ship.
And we have had a disqualification really quickly.
Wow.
The number 168 machine for unsafe driving back all the way on lap 15.
And that 168 machine, rather, trying to double check time in the scoring, was that Porsche Basel by Sork Rennsport machine that was all over the racetrack and stopped on the exit of turn 11, then smacked into the tire barrier. Their race has been done for a while, it seems. They are done for the day, disqualified. As they are officially done, that will potentially score them dead last on the track overall today. 5 drivers do not even make it out onto the racetrack with all this madness meanwhile. German Sim Racing White, 7 Stars Fast, German Sim Racing Orange, Racecraft Esports, and BL Racing all did not make it onto the track today, as you still follow along with Team Vikings as they currently deal with the brigade of lap traffic driving around them.
It's going to be one of those cases you're really going to have to be careful, and you really need to know how to position your car in just the right area. Now, once again, the Porsche is starting to catch up to this fight for 5th in the Mazda class. 3 wide now down into turn number 5, just barely avoiding each other. And that was extremely aggressive racing. And of course, Thomas Erzen, he's actually trying to get around Heiko Loack to put him another lap down, because these 2 drivers, the 2 Porsches, they're actually trying to put each other lap down as well. And Erzen flashes lights furiously trying to get that Porsche out of the way. He gets done. One more Mazda to deal with right when they enter the corkscrew.
He backs off Richardson, gets the better launch. Of course, massively different speeds between the 2 cars today. As Ertzen goes on by, Nobes goes on by as well. So now they cycle themselves around, and again, we're getting to the point where you want to hold your breath. A lot of the traffic start to bottle the way up towards turn 11 once more. And that's been Calamity Corner all day at this point, knowing what's been going on with the traffic. What can you do if you're a faster class driver and knowing it's been absolute chaos? I've been nearly running over these drivers, it seems. What can I do to make sure I'm not the next driver sent off into the corner exit, wrecking around the track?
You really have to be aware of where your car is, where everybody else's car is, really, because knowing where your car is, that's only part of the situation, because you might know where you are, but if you don't know where somebody else is, that's just going to cause another big incident, which is, of course, where the situational awareness that a lot of these drivers are demonstrating a lot of today, actually, it can be such a huge factor into what could become a big pileup and what could just end up as a minor spin. You are right, though. It is one of the corners, just hold your breath. That whenever I see more than 3 cars at a time, I almost walk away.
Badfield's lost and coming out of turn 6 now. Ended up hitting the Sanchez curbs, and he's stuck inside the sand. As you see the MX-5's drive right on by him. That'll lose him some spots as he takes it onto the tow truck.
Backed it hard into the tire walls as well, damaging the rear of the car. Definitely had some aerodynamic damage, and he, of course, just pulled it to a stop and towed it back to the pits. So his day effectively done and dusted. He might be able to get that car back out there to get it back on track, put some more laps in, but he's unfortunately going to be out of position for the time being.
GT Temple Racing also calling it a day. Remember, only one driver behind the wheel today for them, as they are driving not for points. You must have a few drivers available on your roster for a driver swap. They did not have any today due to multiple members of their team under the weather. As we move now to a battle that cycles to 6 now for Gold Racing Team and Bombshell Motorsports, who continues to lose massive amounts of time on all the lone straightaways with the damage.
I feel like the only thing that Bombshell Motorsports car can do at this point is just settle into a bit of a rhythm now, find the new pace you're going to have to get yourself acquainted with, and when you come into the pits, try to fix what damage you can. But at this point, there's really not a whole lot he can do. If you push it as hard as you can, you risk damaging the car even further.
Absolutely. Right now, you don't want to end up compounding or snowballing your incidents throughout the race. They're continuing to let on traffic by. Some of that traffic that is being driving on by, rather, you see is slowly catching up to where a battle's formed up for 4th overall in the class. Pardon me, 5th and 4th rather on the track that's just in front of Gold Racing Team and Bombshell Motorsports. You fall on board still with that Bombshell Motorsports machine as all the traffic zooms on by. But remember, Team Vikings, they've caught on up to where LTP Racing is on the racetrack. They're dealing with that said traffic. LTP Racing might be caught at the wrong place at the wrong time as Team Vikings deals with Sork Racing Orange to the right side.
Ooh boy, making a very, very sudden dive to the right side of the track to let that Porsche through, staying on the right to let the Radical through. We got one more car to let through, and then they're going to be free to race it hard once more. This is, of course, for 5th place in that Mazda field. And just like Daytona, lots of battles beginning to heat up in the Mazda field. Once we more settle into the race, these drivers, just like at Daytona, they took it a bit easier for the first couple of laps, just tried to let traffic through. And now that everything's settled in, they're going to start pushing harder again, just like they did in the first race.
And of course, you got to factor in the pit window. Cars have had to come in, whether it's for repairs, for tires, for everything else apparently in this race today. But so far, no one's really gone to that point, essentially, if I'm making sense to that point where they've come in as part of their exact window as talked about. LTP Racing has just been falling a bit off the pace, not in part with traffic, but of course, in part of, I think, how their tires are starting to factor in, because as this is all going on, we haven't been able to talk about what is all the tires handling like at this point. How are these cars probably handling towards the end of this run like this, with how hard they've been racing on a hot racetrack of 101 degrees today, as it has been today here in the mid-afternoon sun here at the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca.
Well, the tires are definitely going to play a massive factor, especially in the later portions of this race. You know, trying to factor in tire life as to how hard you can push your car. Of course, that's why we saw a lot of incidents earlier on in the races, because the drivers were pushing really hard because they were on fresh tires. And speaking of the devil, Team Vikings pulling off and into pit lane. Is this for a scheduled pit stop? It is beginning to look like it. I see no damage on that car.
And this might mean that pit window might be opened up. Team Vikings hits their marks. And this appears to be a scheduled pit stop now, coming into the stalls inside the top 5. And it looks like they'll also go for their driver change. Yes, indeed, it is their required pit stop for the driver swap. Old Christian Junberg jumps into the machine for Team Vikings Sleipner. He wants to get going, but of course, takes some time as they get the 4 fresh tires on the car.
And the good news about having long pit stops with the tires and the fuel and such for your Mazdas is that you know that everybody else, when they come in, they're going to be in the same boat as you, especially the cars that have damage on them. They're going to be there even longer than you are. So that'll actually really help with these stops, as their drivers are going to be factoring in the fact that everybody's going to be in the longest stop as they are, as there's a lot of traffic trying to work their way by on the front straightaway now, trying to get around Luke King.
Oh, trouble. Real Pixel Motorsports just stopped this way on the exit of the corkscrew as well. So another incident, this time for the 17th overall driver in the class on the track. As Team Vikings comes out, Real Pixel tries to recover. Their counterpart in Jan Philip Wien, who went by them, ended up being the driver involved, the 198, who lost it on turn 6.
Oh dear, another car off at turn 6, as we have been talking about so much throughout the race. It's something we're going to have to keep coming back to. You know, those corners can be so treacherous. I'm actually kind of frankly surprised that we haven't seen anybody strike that sausage curb at turn 6, which is probably the worst point on the track you can hit a sausage curb, is at turn 6, because there's that dip right at the apex where that curb is. So if you hit that curb dead on, you're going to break the oil pan on the underside of your car and start leaking fuel, because you're going to be striking that curb in a dip. So your car's going to be dropping down at a very high speed, and of course the downforce on these cars like the Radicals, it'll just send them flying into the gravel trap as well.
Absolutely right now. For those wondering, the timing of the pit stop we just seen with the MX-5 with Team Vikings, that was 50 minutes. The run went just under that mark, so a bit of a short pit, in fact, running just full, because remember, it's an hour and 2 hour and 25 minute race today. Their pit stop came with essentially about an hour and 40 minutes to go, which means at about 45-50 minutes in that range. So MX-5s at that point, hearing those numbers, does that sound about right to the said pit window for today?
As best we can estimate, it sounds like it to me. Again, it's so hard to be able to pick out when these cars will be coming down, because we could still have a bunch of bigger incidents throughout the race, but that sounds about right to me. Yeah. So we'll be able to kind of keep a look on that when we get later on into the race.
Of course, that's around the window we've seen at some tracks, sometimes around 55 for the MX-5s. For some of the faster classes, it's been kind of a bit, sometimes actually a bit more of a shorter distance at times, sometimes a bit of a longer distance, depends on the track, of course. This is a more technical field track, as you see some of the traffic working its way through said technical corners. So it's not kind of the same, it doesn't have the same kind of fuel burn you might see at like Daytona, of course, where you're going full out for a majority of the racetrack. Here, there's a lot of time where you're having to let the car roll. A lot of times, maybe half throttle, trying to make sure you hit the corners right, or make sure you stay on the racetrack while trying to hit that set preferred line.
This is definitely one of those tracks that is like that. It's just such a technical track that it's almost terrifying to get on full throttle through any of the corners, especially with corners like the corkscrew, where it's such a blind corner. And I remember it took me about 6 or 7 tries before I could get that corner without going off into the other end, just because I kept on cutting the track. Such a difficult corner to get right. You really need to be able to know how to picture what the track ahead of you is going to look like, so you can properly set yourself up, or you're just going to find yourself going off at every single corner on the track.
For those wondering, that was James Ewens that was getting passed on by. That is not for position with Real Pixel Motorsports. Jan Philip Weed once again lapping inter-class traffic. That is a bit amongst the set chaos here today, with an hour 33 minutes left on the clock for round number 2 here at Laguna. Seca again, 5 rounds on the season, once per month for the year, and at this point, of course, we're reaching this midway point. What is on your mind that we haven't might have discussed here for today, for this chaotic race, to say the least?
Well, if this is how it's been like for the first half of the race, what's going to be like when we enter the last hour, the last half hour, the last 15 minutes? How will things change? Because actually, we actually might see a big track temperature change as well, because the cloud cover has begun to roll in, so the track is cooling off. So we might also see some lap times starting to drop. The track is now 98 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is still going to continue to get cooler as time goes on.
And that is coming down from 101 degrees right before the clouds set on in. Kiro Lolak is now in 23rd overall, and the Porsche is now into the pits, so some more drivers are coming in. Banfield's been off and away in the Apex Racing Group Blue Machine, coming out of the pits for prototypes meanwhile, so a lot of the drivers starting to shuffle around with their set strategies now in the racetrack all of a sudden. As this window slowly creeps on in for the driver and fuel stops, you see the overall race leader once more still is Sim RCD Strawberry. Dolzer trying to lap Banfield as he spins in front and collects him. Multiple drivers involved. Kyle Hayer in the wall, Dolzer in the wall. The overall race leader, car, avoids significant physical damage, but that car might have damage underneath and does.
Oh, Lucas Dolzer. Oh, that's the last thing that team wanted to see. They were dominating this race until that point. Big crash involving their leader who has towed it back, and that allows Graphite Racing up into the lead from 17 seconds back at the top of the lap. And just like that, everything we thought might have happened in this race has been thrown into the wind.
And welcome to Laguna Seca, everybody. Sim Racing DE Strawberry in the pits with the tow truck. The reason, of course, coming in to completely destroy that left front suspension. Doesn't look too much outside, but that inside, especially with the angle he took it right on the tire, completely destroyed that entire suspension housing and how that car was able to drive. That allows Graphite Racing to retake the lead for the second time today.
I'm sure that Graphite Racing, that they were wanting to take that lead back for a good portion of the race. I know for a fact that they didn't want to take it like that. Nobody, I mean, there are some drivers that will not complain at all if they can pick up a position or two from the crash, but there are also drivers that they prefer to actually be able to fight for that position, and they don't want to have to pass it just because the driver had no choice but to pull it off the pit road. And unfortunately, that is exactly what just happened. So very, very unfortunate for that team that have been so dominant. They were looking to get a back-to-back victory here today, and unfortunately, all that work and hope out the window.
Lee Ward's taking the WR Racing Machine for the prototypes into the pits. And coming into the car, Steve Rene Christensen now for that number 17. You're looking now at WB Racing's number B, what am I saying? This is not Recess, everybody, from the 1990s. That is the letter B machine once again, with Nobes into second. That is their B entry. He's 8.6 seconds back. Now knowing the information that one of the top competitors is out and your teammates now sitting in the pits, what do you do in the B entry for your team knowing that, oh hey, I can win this race now?
I stamp on the power, push as hard as you can. That's really the only thought that could be flashing through his mind. We might see the pace begin to pick up for a couple of these drivers in the Radical class now that the leader has been taken out, especially for second place. Our battle for the Porsche lead has closed in a fair bit as well. They're just hovering within a second of each other.
For those that are saying, what happened what happened to these cars? They've just been quietly working their way around the racetrack is what they've been doing, essentially. The traffic's been working their way around. They haven't been bumped around like a majority of the Porsches. And so Kurt Crum has led a majority of the time here on the racetrack. In second spot is Marco Durix in NAB Racing, who's been gaining more and more time with open space. This time, 2/10 gain with no traffic to deal with. So all of a sudden, now these drivers can focus on what they want to do. Come out to play and come out to battle.
Indeed, and this is where we could see the racing starting to heat up again. We haven't really seen a whole lot of battling going on in the Porsche field. This was the same way for Daytona. We didn't see as much going on in the Porsche field as we did in the Radical or the Miata field. So I find that to be quite interesting, especially since they're actually probably the biggest field on the track.
And the MX-5 pit window wide open. It appears that the world of sim racing cars are in. Both their main cars are in with Bombshell Motorsports. Andrew Mick is behind the wheel. Hayer has jumped out of the car rather, in what has been a absolute wild one to try and deal with if you're an MX-5, essentially being eaten by cookies. Juan's still inside the car for now, still waiting for his driver swap, while Diego Vasquez Dunez is behind the wheel for his junior entry. So the top drivers in the MX-5s now behind the wheel for their cars. First one is up and away. As you see, this one is the World Sim Racing main entry. And for those wondering what that reference, some of these MX-5s have been eating up like the Cookie Monster, trying to eat chocolate chip cookies, Nolan.
Now, I think that's definitely... It's a fair analogy. I mean, I'm not going to say you're exactly wrong. It's an interesting analogy at that, but it's also not a wrong analogy, to say the least. And, of course, Daniel Baratheon going to be looking to try to maybe work his way. Do you think he'll be able to work his way up to third place in class to go for another spot there? Because, of course, Gold Racing Team just coming up to turn number 6 now. Do you wonder if they'll be able to make anything work?
Honestly, at this point, anything's possible. Because Gold Racing Team has been in some shuffles and some battles for their said class. That's a potential possibility. Anything can happen at this point. Tobias Rift has come on in as Nibble has had some trouble. It appeared.
Wayne Wortley for Nibble Racing trying to get around that are your little fight for second place in your Miata field. Got into the sausage curbs in turn number 6 and went spinning around. Kept it out of the barrier, but he might have a little bit of damage on the underside of that car. Going back to what I had said, there's that little dip right where that sausage curb is. And if you're in a car as low as the Radicals, oh boy, you're going to be in a risky position.
That still keeps him in the top 5 with all the craziness that's happened. Torque Freak Racing Maggots into the pits. Philip Roberts into the driver's seat as more MX-5 duck in. Marcel Unger's going to come in for his team. Matthew Richardson overshot the pits, and he's backing up into his stall. That's going to lose him significant amount of time. Remember, he was as far as in the top 5. He comes out of his car as he'll go for the driver swap. Ducking into the seat will be Jonathan Ninge, into the car, as they are going to lose a heck of a lot of time. Paul Cassidy for Gold's Racing comes into the car. Marcel Unger once more into his car, while Eric Mick for Bombshell Motorsports coming in from the Porsche battle. We were seen for that race class lead at one point. He's getting fresh tires. Gold Racing Team White for that class also into the pits. So everyone ducking in with an hour, 24 minutes, and 45 seconds left on the clock.
Of course, disaster for LTP Racing, who overshot their pit stall, had to back it up. They lost at least 15, 20 seconds in the pit stop, which can be absolutely horrendous on a track that's as short as Laguna Seca, where the laps are between a minute 18 if you're in the Radicals and closer to a minute 38 or minute 40 if you're in the Mazdas. And of course, LTP Racing coming out right in front of Bombshell Motorsports, who is not going to be happy about having to wait because they cannot pass in that pit exit lane. So they're not going to be happy about having to wait. You can actually hear him feathering the throttle.
And here we go.
Way around, and he's off.
Well, that's a way to get by, I guess. Absolutely overruns the corner, goes into the dirt, coming on the pit exit lane. Ninge is now going to have to deal with
big crash.
And big crash will have to... Where is the crash, sir?
WR Racing going for the Andretti hairpin, just got turned by a Porsche and slammed hard into the tire wall. Probably one of the hardest crashes we've had in the entire race. Definitely going to be suspension trouble for that car.
And what happened here, we're going to have to see, because they were side by side. He already had some damage on the right rear. Remember, he had spent some time in the pits and then just comes up across the racetrack.
And that car is going to be absolutely demolished. I'm surprised that that car is actually not crabbing at all. I thought that car might have had some major suspension damage, because that was such a vicious hit into the tire wall. It's definitely an unusual place to crash as well, on the right side of the braking zone for the Andretti hairpin. I don't think we've seen anything like that in quite a while.
Now let's look at the steering wheel. It looks like it was moving. He just drove straight up across him. I don't know what the thought process was there with that.
Maybe he thought he was clear, but he wasn't?
Only thing I can think of, hoping that the Porsche was going to check up, but absolute calamity once more. Remember, he is 7th in the class. That's 5 laps down, however, right behind Sim RCDE Strawberry Machine, which is still inside the pits. Meanwhile, the battle for fourths now with Gold Racing Team in front of LTP Racing all of a sudden. So the absolute calamity continues here at Laguna Seca, is to say the very least, as the gap is right now 9/10 of a second between the two.
Of course, LTV Racing fresh out of the pits with their new driver, Jonathan Jonathan NG, as I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that name at all. As this battle could either spread out or it could close in. It's looking like it might actually be spreading out a little bit, though. Could Paul Cassidy for Gold Racing Team actually be finding the way to pull away, as actually LTB Racing goes clean off?
Well, that's going to help them pull away. Going off, losing half a second from one mistake. As the LTP Racing Machine, we've seen them starting to fall backwards from where they were before the pit window. They're continuing to fall backwards, it seems, their car after said pit window.
They're going to continue to fall back a little bit. It could just be cold tires, or maybe it could be that driver trying to figure out the pace for the car. Once he gets the pace all sorted out, I feel like they could close in this battle to go forward again. This is, of course, your fight for fourth that is beginning to kind of peter off.
I think it's completely petered off. In fact, the German Sim Racing Bloom entry that was pushed up into the gravel, and that incident into the Andretti hairpins back on the racetrack. Meanwhile, a few car lengths ahead of them. This battle starting to be broken up now by Sasso Prosen, who dives it on in through said lap. Traffic and right into the gravel. Graphite Racing's in, Prosen to the gravel.
So that was, again, one of those interesting little situations. Was that a technical issue? The wheel turned to the left, though, as the car was going right, so it looked like it was just a case of getting loose under braking.
You see Graphite Racing into the pits once more. That's the overall class leader. Ducking in WR Racing, currently going for the overcut. Into the car goes Richard Bell, who gets his fresh tires on the machine. You're also seeing back on the racetrack, Sim RCDE Strawberry has Patrick Yum behind the wheel, 6 laps down. They're back into the race as well as they try and basically recover points.
Yeah, it is so unfortunate. I feel like Patrick Young, I know he's an extremely fast driver. He proved that at Daytona. As fast as he is, though, I really don't feel like there's a whole lot he can do is pick up trouble on the track.
Sork Racing Orange lost it in turn 11 now. As you look at Graphite Racing coming out, Sork Racing Orange did a 360 on the exit of turn 11.
Well, that was definitely an interesting one. Another case of drivers just starting to overcook it. Looking with the replay on their screen, out of turn 10. Was he a little bit late on the braking point? It looks like he just got the car unsettled under braking, spun it around, then spun it around the other way, spun it around to the left, of course, because you don't want to spin it into the traffic when, you know, it's a very blind corner. You know you've got traffic coming up on you here. Really, he got that car underway really, really quickly, though, and he's not hesitating to try to make up the lost time.
And now you look at some drivers trying to gain positions. Meanwhile, Enigma ClubSport Porsche in front of Team Vikings right now. That is Valhall. Their entry now in the class that's 7th overall on the racetrack. And you can see, of course, what different drivers, of course, say behind this said battle. They're going to have to deal with Banfield, who's still in 6th, mind you, after a couple wrecks and a couple spins today, who is going to break up this battle for the time being.
Of course, Banfield has had so much bad luck. He's been involved in several incidents today, so he's just looking to have a bit more luck as SROC Racing Orange actually pulls down onto pit lane. That might be for tires because they got really loose in the run-up to the corkscrew as well. Didn't lose it, but they got a fair bit twitchy, to say the least. We're going to keep eyes on this battle for 7th place, though, in your Porsche field.
Yeah, and remember, this is still all mixed up, the entire running order, essentially, for all the classes. Gold Racing Team White is the class leader after all of this for the time being. Bombshell Motorsports all the way back to 3rd after they had ducked in. German Disaster Racing is in 2nd. So this has completely changed up entirely of this entire race. Mind you, some teams are on completely different strategies and or have not even ducked down the pits. More leaders are into the pits now.
Stefan Nobes for WR Racing B is down on pit lane now, getting tires. Will they go for a driver change? They are trying to beat Graphite Racing, who was 44 seconds back at the start of that, out of the pits. They are going to go for a driver change. Martin Green hopping into the car for your overall leader.
And again, the mandatory driver swap coming on in. German Disaster Racing trying to hold on to 2nd, falls back to 3rd. As zooming right on by goes the spot of Bombshell Motorsports, who was the overall leader before the pit cycle. And again, to remind you, these drivers are on completely different cycles. Griff had tried a big-time undercut, in fact, a long while ago, as mentioned, if you overheard a while back, along with a couple of the other drivers in the class. And now they have fallen back out to the top 3 for now. Bombshell Motorsports still has one more driver to try and pass, though, on the racetrack for the lead, to try and get this lead back. It's a big distance between the two by about at least 5 seconds.
And 5 seconds at the very least. Looking like that is, of course, Jean-Philippe Gendron, who's going to be trying to catch up. But for now, though, he's going to have to focus on defense from Tobias Ritt, who he is beginning to pull away from ever so gradually. Mickey, of course, one of those drivers that is extremely fast with the Porsches. Again, he has proved this at Daytona. He's continuing to prove that today as he tries to pull away from Tobias Ritt.
And you see here, Rick going to slowly come on in. He has not come into the pits, by the way, or rather I should say has not swapped himself out of the car yet today. He has had to come down the pits once today. That was just a 15-second stop, though. He and his team may still have to come in because, remember, a lot of these teams required, of course, to make a driver swap in this race. We've seen one team today not have a second driver available, as talked about with GT Tempo Racing. They were not running for points, so you do have to have a driver swap. Ritt has not done so yet today. Ritt has not done so today, rather.
He's going to have to find a way to come in for the pits eventually without losing too much time. He is going to have a bit of a difficult time, though, trying to figure out when he wants to come in. Excuse me. Trying to figure out when do you want to come in order so you lose the least amount of time. But at the same time, he's clearly not gaining any time by staying out here. He's more or less holding even with Eric McKee, though he has gradually lost time over the past 3 laps.
And you see that time that he's been gradually losing more and more on the track, each time in the red. Is that a difference, you think, between driver skill at this point, or basically difference of car? Because remember, you might see a slight little push on the left front for Ritt's car. It does have some damage. Mick has kept the car completely clean.
I'd say it could be a factor of both. I feel like driver personality definitely would have something to do with that. Based on the fact that these two drivers have actually been kind of holding more or less even, though they have, of course, been pulling away Eric Mick from Tobias Ritt, I feel like it could be a little bit of that tiny damage on the left side of that car as well. So it could be a factor of both.
James Ewan's coming back into the pits as this is all going on. You see this time still losing time. So a couple tenths each time he's starting to lose to that back bumper for that said battle. Again, the overall class leader is still Gold Racing Team White for the time being. That still has Jean-Philippe Gurdron behind the wheel that's been driving now for 48 into 49 laps, as the battle for 12th overall starts to heat up with Huge Ass Gold, starting to get into a huge shuffle with Team Vikings and Enigma Club Sport amongst the battle.
Of course, Team Vikings just making a pass on Huge Ass Gold in turn number 9, which was pretty much a textbook overtake. And Enigma Club Sport Porsche now looking to make a move on the inside, coming into the hairpin. He's going to have to back out of it, though, as they got him out of this right in the way. And that is World of Sim Racing Team Junior that's going to cause that Enigma Club Sport car to check up big time, forcing him to back out of his attempt to go for a pass. I think that's why Huge Ass Gold did not defend harder going into the Andretti hairpin, because he knew that Miata was going to get in the way, so he figured, I don't have to worry about this. That Miata's going to kind of do the work for me.
Thomas Grandel is pulling away a little bit with that. Shane Cameron is driving the Huge Ass Gold machine. Wortley comes on through. Sergei Obel's Lalexa drives in that third driver in the train in the Enigma machine for the Club Sport Porsche, as Cameron tries to avoid the sausage curbs, takes it a little bit softly though. A little bit stronger of a run out of turn 6 though for Enigma though, because they took it stronger.
I don't blame Shane Cameron for taking it a bit easier through these curves, and honestly, I really cannot blame them based off of everything that has happened to those huge-ass cars throughout the course of this race and through Daytona. I honestly cannot blame them for wanting to take it a little easier. They're just trying to keep those cars as clean as they possibly can, trying to keep it out of everybody else, just trying to bring them home at this point.
And you see the battle starting to get to the point where a driver wants to dive into the inside. It goes. A Miata goes into the tires nearly as Liexa goes into another position. Moves up one more spot. Move him up. That is going to be now 7th on the racetrack that time by Cameron. Losing some time, having to take the outside line. Nearly going splat though was Baston Salmon, who went off into the sand and nearly hit the concrete.
Yeah, just about. I thought he was going to hit the concrete for a second there. I think he was just more thinking, you know what, these guys are fighting really hard behind me. I probably need to get out of here. He did get on the power a little early, so he probably overshot the corner as well. And they actually got loose in the sand, which is what caused him to nearly hit that wall. Of course, managed to keep it going straight. So good job on that Miata. Now the question is, can Cameron fight back and take that position back from ClubSport?
Yeah, and you see him starting to pull on away a bit as this is going on. Meanwhile, Calamity in the Andretti hairpin, as you can tell. Where it is the first car that's gone through this. The second is now Mick, who is stuck in this train and trying to dive on and locking it up his ring. He collects a Miata. A second Porsche goes into the dirt. That's now racing. A couple more Miatas get involved. That's Torque Freak Racing. Megas that gets wrecked in the middle of the racetrack. They were up to 3rd after a recovery drive. An absolute calamity.
Something had to give there. That was not going to last. I will say I did not expect for it to happen up front. I thought it was going to happen with the cars that were going 3 abreast. And Luke King making a miss by the skin of his teeth, trying to get around that other Miata that was stopped at the outside of the corner, missing him by mere inches. And Tobias Ritt is, of course, going to have a lot of work ahead of him to make up for lost time.
And you know, the drivers that got the worst of that, again, Torque Freak Racing, they fell back to 4th after they got an incident in the race lead for the MX-5s. Now they're back once more, even more time because of the incident. You're looking now as the overall race leader, Still World Racing Team, who took that lead after said incident, and that's how the junior team also got to 2nd. Something's got to give for this race. Somebody's going to have to say, okay, somebody calm down. We've destroyed too many cars and spent too many millions of dollars on body repairs already this race. Something's got to give.
I'm surprised we haven't seen more penalties being handed out, to be completely frank with you. We've seen so many collisions on and off throughout the field. It just cannot go on like this forever. We've already destroyed about half the field this race over the course of the entire event. We've still got an hour left of this race. Are we going to have anybody left at the end of this race at this point?
30 cars are still on the racetrack, mind you, in this race at this point. Pardon me, 31 I should rather say. WR Racing, Team Vikings, Sleipner, rather. Apex Racing Group, along with that was the Ross Banfield entry. GT Temple Racing, who just blew. Porsche Basel by Sorel Rensport in Disabled Motorsport amongst the DNFs. Here's your top 8 running overall. Meanwhile, currently in the lead for the prototype class is Graphite Racing, and what has been an absolute wreckfest, I guess is the only way I can really describe it. WR Racing's B car 47 seconds back. 3rd, SK Motorsports. Neville Racing 4th, Apex Racing Group blue. Sorek Racing orange, the top 6 left. While in 7th right now is Sim RCDE Strawberry. WR Racing is in 8th. A major save, meanwhile, for Cameron, it appears, on the racetrack, as that has all been shuffling along. That was out of turn 3 for Hugh Jass, part of the Porsches.
Overcooked it just a little bit coming off the corner and almost had a head-on collision with the wall. We're going to ride on board with Shane Cameron to show you what exactly happened. Coming through turn 3, so he turns in for the apex right there, goes through a little hot, gets the power too early, and has a big moment of a recovery coming to turn number 4. Great car control.
Hugo. Meanwhile, in 7th spot, pardon me, apologies there for the slight technical glitch. Enigma ClubSport Porsche in 7th, Hugh Jass Gold in the 8th spot right now. And right now, that currently sorts out the Porsches. World of Sim Racing, meanwhile, for those MX-5s, currently leads the way for the class. The junior class in second. Megat's in third for Torque Freak Racing. The Gold Racing Team fourth in the class. LTP Racing fifth. Real Pixel Motorsport in sixth. Bombshell Motorsport seventh in the 286. That has been dealing with devastation, to say the least. Well, Ava Vervatic has somehow come up into 8th after spending the early portion of the race in the pits 15 laps down. That is the kind of race we have seen today here on RaceSpotTV, as SK Motorsports has taken a slide into turn 10.
Trying to get around to Miata and just barely had a collision. It looks like there's damage on the right rear for that car, and it looks like he did collide with LTP Racing trying to get around him. Sent that car right around, managing to barely keep it out of the concrete wall. Might have just grazed it.
And he was as high as second that time by. That was Carter Cringer, Conjure, who just did graze the wall and was able to get going, but has to duck into the pits after the contact. Big suspension damage, though, as you might expect from that kind of an incident.
More heartbreak for SK Motorsports. They were running in 4th place until now on the lead lap, and that is going to be their day effectively done and over with. So that leaves Graphite Racing is, of course, still in the lead. And the crazy thing about all of this that we've been seeing with Graphite Racing is that they're now 44 seconds above. So remember how at Daytona we had SimRC.de Strawberry completely destroying the field. Now it's Graphite Racing's turn to prove that they can do the same.
Right now, 44 seconds ahead once again, if you just heard that, over WR Racing. Right now, Richard Bell is behind that wheel. Nibble Racing, though, they currently were in towards a potential battle as Conjure has lost it again. He has spun this time into turn 5. So that they just got fresh tires. That suspension damage is still there. The car currently skewed to the right.
Oh dear, and Condinger trying so hard to hang on to that car because they know how long it takes to get suspension damage fixed. They're going to have to bring it down, though. They just cannot keep that car out there on track. It is just not safe for both themselves or anyone else. It's only going to lead to more heartbreak if they continue what they're doing here.
And you see now on your screen that said damage with under an hour and 4 minutes to go. You can tell just by once you go down the straightaway, that thing is skewing from the right front to away from the right rear. And you see that right there, down the straightaway, how it's crab walking. We'll have to see if he decides to bring it into the pits. Jacob Toffs came down this time. Kunjinger comes in, having a hard time with the pit entry because of the damage.
It's just something that has to be done, unfortunately. And I do feel bad for SK Motorsports because they have been doing a good job of trying to keep it out of everybody else. They were on the lead lap. They were doing so well trying to keep it out of everyone else. They had such a clean run. And then they just had such an unfortunate incident with LTP Racing. Just got clipped, wrong place, wrong time type of scenario. Nothing they could have done.
Nothing indeed. And nothing you can do if you're World of Sim Racing Team Junior, as they've just had technical issues. Their driver behind the wheel, Anduñas, is off the racetrack. He is out from the second spot, so the 1-2 for the MX-5s is gone for World of Sim Racing.
And more technical difficulties for so many of the drivers on track. And we've had a couple of drivers that have bowed out because of these difficulties, whether it be hardware or network issues. So this is, of course, going to put a real damper on all the races for those teams, especially if they've had such a clean run or if they've been running really high up in those classes, like the 1-2 that World of Sim Racing has been having.
And that's going to drop them down the running order at least a couple laps. Juniors got back in quickly. However, that's going to drop them outside the top 5. And now for the MX-5s, Torque Freak Racing Megas is the drivers in second spot all of a sudden. You see them now. They've been bumped around, beaten around, knocked around like a pinball. They're 1 minute and 8 seconds back. Still have a chance based on how this race has gone.
I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if the leader for the Mazda field ended up crashing out, allowing that second place to get the win. At this point, I'm just about ready for anything. I'm not going to make any wild predictions, because if I do, probably the exact opposite is going to happen.
Yeah, Sork Racing Orange, meanwhile, is taking a trip in the sand. This is right in front of them as they come towards turn number 10. They work their way through turn 9. Sork Racing is back on the racetrack, but it's been kind of an absolutely insane race. I've said this a couple of times. I don't think I've ever seen a race this dramatic, as a warning's just been given on the racetrack for an incident on lap 51, this time to the 142 machine on the track. That is German Disaster Racing that had that absolute chaotic wreck in turn 3. And they just ran over some cones.
And more cones are going to go flying, and we're going to need to go out and get those back onto the racetrack, and more contact.
And that is Mick. Mick has just knocked around the Porsche, and that's going to lose some more time. Williams goes on by. That is not for position. Once again, the penalty was on lap 51 for turn 3. That was that incident we seen that was going 3 wide in that situation. Either way, you can see German Disaster Racing still holding on to the 4th spot and just lost about 5 more seconds, though, because of the contact you've seen there.
And, of course, the contact having a huge factor to what's going on here with this field, as the Porsche field struggling still to work their way through the Miatas, though. It's definitely become to get a lot more polite as to how these drivers manage to work their way around. Tobias Schmidt still has not come down for that driver change, so that is slightly concerning. I am actually, beginning to wonder when Rid is going to have to bring that down, because you just can't keep one driver out there forever. And
yeah, I've been trying to double check the exact time he's come into pit, but I do know it was at least 10, 15 laps at least off cycle compared to the rest of the drivers that are up towards the higher part of the race grid today. So on a much different strategy, it seems, for this team. Still, well, of course, confirmed that came in lap 40 was the exact time of the pit stop that he came in when he ran a minute and 59 seconds, I believe that was, on the racetrack. Of course, drivers have to be in the car. If correct me if I'm wrong, they have to be in the car at least a certain amount of time.
And that's what we're beginning to think. If of course that is the case, we're not sure if that is or not. I'm trying to figure that out right now myself. I think that might have been for a different event, though, as we're going to keep eyes on this battle up front.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens here. Either way, apologies for confusion. Of course, apologies there, as now we continue on in this race, as this race continues to cycle on around. More trouble, though. Team Vikings involved in a multi-car incident, it looks like, with another Miata.
And that, of course, is going to be another big impactor for the race. It appears to be that a Radical might have been involved as well. No, that is a Porsche that is stuck down there. Replay now up on your screens. That was the 171 machine. So what happened here? One of the Miatas just went clean off and clipped that Porsche as it was going right by.
And another incident in this race. This just continues to snowball more and more. I don't know what else you can really say.
It's getting to the point where you wonder how aggressive the race is going to be towards the end, because the penalties could start to mount up here in the closing portions of the race. So you wonder who's going to be trying to fight harder in the last hour of this race, and who's going to be actually easing off a bit more, trying to save time. Battle for 6th place going on to the Porsche class.
And you see that distance, about half a second now. That is, of course, involving the Team Vikings car that's behind them now after some of that trouble that we just seen. So you go right from an incident into a battle.
That definitely seems to be how the case for this race has turned out. It's just one of those things where that's just how it works. You know, you're going to end up in a spin, but because there's so much traffic constantly going by you, by the time you actually get the car back pointed the right direction, you're already fighting for another spot when you get back going.
Yeah, and you see them still trying to work through some of the traffic. Now that is again Torque Freak Racing they work on through at this point. With just under an hour to go in the clock, what's going through your mind at this point?
Well, the race is definitely beginning to settle back into its rhythm, so I'm thinking who's going to be the one to break the calm, and so we will throw us once more into the storm that has been the entire first half of the race. It's definitely begun to kind of ease off quite a bit as we got to the halfway point, and for about a half hour after that as well.
Half a second distance still between the two right now as they still sort themselves out. Currently one of the closer battles on the racetrack at this point, as you see, though, still even with that said incident, still a faster pace from Grendel compared to the Exo now behind the wheel. It's down once more as much as 0.3 of a second and has a bit of a toe down the straight into the Andretti hairpin.
That run down to the Andretti hairpin is really the only portion of the track where the draft actually comes into factor, that and the run up to the corkscrew. But definitely on the run out of turn 11, which is why it can be so important to get a good drive off. As Grendel's going to maybe try to look for a move at turn 3. Nope, going to get back in line. Both drivers jumping over the sausage curves, back end stepping out ever so slightly through turn number 4. We got trouble.
And it's a prototype wrecking on the exit at turn 11. WR Racing 17 has stopped on the exit. Locked it up in the middle of the corner. Still stopped on the bottom of the racetrack as you see nowhere they can go in the blind exit. Nearly cutting across a Miata as he comes across into the sand.
And more trouble in turn 11, which can be named as Calamity Corner. I feel at this point it's definitely earned that name. Once more, getting out the power too early and just spun that car right around. Has to stay stopped there for a good portion of time while he waits for traffic to go through. And we're going to watch as he goes to get the power back on. And as he's going to turn up into the racetrack here, like you said, just about sends Miata into the sand.
Absolutely right now. You see, though, having to go in the sand to try and make sure that he didn't stay down there. That was it. It was a risky move, yes. But he had to gun it to somewhere to try and get some space to turn around.
Now that is true. You can't just pull a quick 180 on the exit of such a vital corner of the track, especially when the corner is so incredibly blinded. You've got drivers that are constantly going to be trying to go for position there as well.
And for those wondering, for some of the drivers that have had some interesting choices and or have kept the same drivers in, they're going to potentially have their driver swaps now. Gold Racing Team White is in. To clarify the regulation, there is that requirement. You must make the driver swap. The prototype, the Porsche leader, has come in. The maximum you can drive in the race is 1 hour and 40 minutes. And right now, we have reached just towards that mark, or slowly approaching said mark, on the racetrack. That is why Jan-Philippe Grodot comes out. Coming into the car comes Jeffrey Granzato for his driver swap. Tobias Ritt also amongst the drivers. So some teams, it appears, which is what the thought process appeared to be and was, in fact, was trying to save time and try and hopefully gain time on the track themselves by not making the driver swap on the first pit stop. They are doing it on the second.
And that is, of course, going to be one of the big factors. And this, of course, could potentially be the last pit stops we see for the Porsche field of the day when they come in for those driver swaps. And for those drivers that are still out there on the track with their original driver, they've only got about 5 to 10 minutes now to bring it down to get those drivers changed around. One fight that might close in here shortly is the battle for second place overall. Because remember that incident with WR Racing B, well, that allowed Nibble Racing and Wayne Wortman to close right in, and they're within a second of that car now.
Some unique strategies of this race. You see the distance about 1 second between him and Nimble Racing now on said track. And of course, Nimble Racing's had to work their way through their own mistakes now. Some trouble going on the track as some cars making some contact. But right now, the focus stays on that place in second. That car in second, trying to avoid their own contact.
Everybody's really trying to kind of avoid their own incidents at this point, trying to make sure that they can get through everything all nice and clean.
And you know what that bane was? There was a car that hit the pit wall on the pit exit in Louise Everton for Sim Sport News Racing powered by iZone Black. That is the 40 car, 19th in class for the Porsches, that ended up smacking the wall on the left side coming on the pit exit. So this is another one that's had trouble. Nimble Racing has had technical issues. Wortley is off the track.
and more technical issues strike again to plague this race. And it's been an issue that's definitely been a much higher factor than it was at Daytona. And Nibble Racing in third place overall, the next to suffer from such an incident. He was, of course, the last car on the lead lap, meaning at the time, if he could get back in here quick, we're only going to have 2 cars on the lead lap. Graphite Racing and WR Racing B, who's a good 46 seconds at least behind them.
You see that car that still hit the pit wall at this point. They're going to come right on in because obviously when you smack the wall like you did there and have your tire basically not even touching the ground on the left side, you have to get your damage repaired.
Yeah, for sure, especially when you hit that pit wall, because the way that that pit wall is, if you really hit that on the left side, and if it's where I think you hit that pit wall, that is a very hard impact as well, because that wall kind of bends in towards the entrance to turn number 1, so it's a bit of a hard hit as well, meaning that he's going to have some big damage on that car as well that he's going to have to work through.
Let's go up to Fleischer Motorsport. Fleischer Motorsport had contact from behind, got spun around at one point, have since then had a quiet one. They're currently 8th on the track in the class and trying to gain some time on German Disaster Racing. They put Jans Lehmann, pardon me, behind the wheel as Manuel Mayer behind the wheel for his machine, dealing with Torque Freak Racing, not for position, coming up behind.
Now the big question is for Manuel Mayer, do you think that with his driving style he can catch Jans Lehmann for German Disaster Racing? Is there enough time and space for him to be able to do so? Or is it going to be one of those incidents where they start to catch him and then they're just going to end up dropping back into the later portion of the stint?
Well, that's something where they were actually even, in fact, faster at times during the second part of their stint, if you remember. They're going to pass by some of the drivers that have either crashed, had technical issues, or made driver swaps. Relative Sim Racing team with their MX-5 were actually amongst that said group there as they're coming out of the pits with David Del Rio behind the wheel. Meanwhile, for Mayer, at this point, I think they're kind of in that situation where the car's been kept clean other than that contact from behind. They can keep going, just like Relative Sim Racing team's Del Rio comes onto the track.
And David Del Rio still in first place for that Mazda field, exactly where they want to be. And where is Torque Freak Racing? They're still on the front straightaway. So there is a massive gap between these two drivers. So I think it's safe to say at this point in time that we will not be seeing a 5,000th of a second photo finish like we saw at Daytona. I'm pretty sure, though, that Del Rio is not going to be complaining about that. That's one thing he doesn't have to worry about, is fighting for the lead in this class. He's just got to keep it on the track and out of everybody else.
Yeah, and right now, in his own world right now, for now, the problem is, being in your own world has not been kind of the preferred situation, because someone comes to break that said bubble and comes right into your back bumper, essentially. As he's still the leader again in the MX-5, second place Torque Freak Racing Megas. Let's take him right on board here. As you can see, he's having to wheel that thing. He actually, it looks like, nearly lost the car coming down the hill, going through turn number 9.
Now that might be because of some damage he's got on the left side of the car. He actually made some contact with the sausage curb big time in turn number 6 and almost lost the car there. So that could be a potential issue that might crop up for him shortly here. That could be why he's trying to fight that car so much coming through the corner.
Under 48 minutes to go here on RaceSpotTV for the second round of the ClubSport Series here at WeatherTech Raceway by Laguna, Seca. And what has been an absolute wild one, to say the very least. Nab Racing locking up the brakes as you see up in front. But essentially everyone else has just spread themselves out at this point. Like, now the problem is this right now at the point where things settle in? Or is this, you think, the calm before the storm, before you reach those final few times around the racetrack? And trouble, pardon me, trouble! Richard Bell's locked up the brakes. Graphite Racing avoids contact, though, through the corkscrew. They nearly collected 3 different cars as they're backing away, losing 3 seconds.
Oh dear, Graphite Racing just barely avoiding all the Porsches, managed to get that car spun off the track. Didn't lose a lot of time, didn't make any contact. Apart from a couple of overheated tires, Graphite Racing will be able to definitely remain in the lead for now. He's going to have some work with trying to get through all this lap traffic right ahead of him. but as far as his lead is concerned, I still feel like he's got this one all wrapped up.
Wrapped up for sure at this point. Problem is, I'm going to say this once more. It looked wrapped up for SimRacing.de Strawberry. Look where that got them. It looked wrapped up at one point for some of the other teams. Look where that happened. They're back in the pits now with Patrick Young coming back in. They came right after the repairs that believe this might be their final pit stop. In fact, might be possible schedule. But at this point, this is the kind of race where you don't want to stay comfortable. No one's been able to stay comfortable in this race because a lot of drivers have had trouble.
That is true. You got to make sure that you stay on your toes, and you can get yourself relaxed so you're not so uptight, but don't make sure that you're not too relaxed. You got to be comfortable, but you've also got to be alert at the same time. There's always that happy little medium where you're aware of what's going on around you, but you're not completely freaking out about it. Because if you lose your calm, that's also how wrecks happen. You make a couple of twitchy little maneuvers, and that's all it can take at the car with the track like this to send your car into the tires.
And for sure indeed right now, you see though Graphic Racing going to lap them a couple more times as they're still leading by 41 seconds even after the spin over WR Racing. That again set is 1-2 for the prototype class today. Still in the lead now after the cycle with the drivers taking their driver swaps. Bombshell Motorsports is in the lead with Nav Racing for the Porsches, while still in the lead in the R class for the Sim Racing team. As you see those times continue to tick on by, another driver having problems.
More drivers continuing to have problems here, as this time it appears was a Porsche once more in the corkscrew. Sorry, it was a Radical in the corkscrew. Kevin Enderman sending it off and into the tires. It was only a matter of time before that happened. I'm surprised that didn't happen earlier. You get just a tiny little bit of air. It is possible to come down through the corkscrew, go in there with too much speed. That's all it took to send Kevin Enderman into the barrier.
And at the same time, you mentioned just amongst the 286 rather, also had similar trouble with contact. Remember, they had some significant damage. They came on in. They've changed drivers. That they ended up, of course, having trouble, it appears, on the racetrack as well, having to come on in once more. In fact, it's because they've just been given a stop and go for lap 48 as well on top of that.
And that is just going to add insult to injury at this point in time. And that was, of course, Vinny Laguna, and the penalty was served to Bombshell Motorsports. That 286 Miata just exiting the pit stop now.
Yeah, so a penalty given off from race control, and it making the driver swap as well. We've talked about the massive damage that's been on that car. As you follow along with the prototype, of course, that recovered, of course, from that said spin. Right in the midst of a battle, by the way, which is why it sticks here. SK Motorsports still in 6th, despite their suspension damage, 3 laps down. They're not going to be able to make the pass. Sork Racing, though, can, with the Apex Racing Group with Jeff Yeager behind the machine, currently holding on to a top 4 spot on the racetrack, as they're going to let by the driver that is on fresher tires by in SK Motorsports. They're going to let him go, knowing that it's not for position. Yeager and Enderman are going to try and battle it out amongst themselves for 4th.
And there's 2 ways this battle can end here. Either one of these drivers wins out and just pulls away, or it's going to end with both of them going off the track. I wonder which one it's going to be, though, because it's got to be one or the other. You just can't have 2 drivers in Radicals fighting so hard forever. One of them is going to have to give here. Who do you think it's going to be, though?
We'll have to see who gives the give. We'll have to see into turn 6. Both drivers nearly matching the lines. Better exit, though, for Enderman, as he was able to take it a little bit faster. Tries to slingshot in, backs up the corner, and he's going to try and take the tighter line to the corkscrew. It looks like Enderman's taking a bit better lines at this point, but they got a Porsche right in front. Yeager might use him as the pick. Prosen up in front. They go nearly bumper to bumper. Enderman nearly runs him over. Enderman cut to the left side, has to cut back to the right, cuts into the grass as they go 3 wide. Yeager punches down Prosen, and everyone survives.
somehow everybody survived that. Enderman keeping the car going straight, turned it back into the corner. Can he get a run here? Coming into the Andretti Hairpin, and there's a bit of a shot from behind, and that sends Jaeger clean off the circuit.
And Jaeger ended up hitting the brakes early with an MX-5 checking up in front, sent off into the dirt. Severe damage to the back bumper of Jeff Jaeger's machine, and that's going to move Enderman up another spot. My goodness.
Well, it's like I said, something's going to have to give because they can't keep fighting that hard forever. Either one of them is going to run away with it, or they were going to end up in the dirt, and sure enough, both of them ended up in the dirt one way or another. Enderman in turn 11, and then Jaeger in turn number 1 at the Andretti Hairpin. So, can Jaeger find a way to claw his way back up to SROC Racing Orange?
Bombshell Motorsports once again into the pits now for a potential scheduled stop. Again, leader for the Porsches, now in for his second pit stop for Eric Mick.
Eric Mick going to be coming down now to get, it looks like it's just going to be a quick 4-tire stop. Actually, they're doing a driver change as well. Kurt Krum coming back into the car. So interesting decision by that team to put Kurt Krum back into the car. Still sitting there on pit lane. It's looking like this is going to be a bit of a longer stop.
Remember, the minimum for a 2.4-hour race, a driver has to be in the car 15 minutes. That is over, of course, the time that Krum was out of the car, but that fits in what is to be expected. It looks like they want Kurt Krum to be back in the car, potentially because of comfortability, maybe.
That is true. Maybe Kurt Krum is the faster driver, because quite often what we'll see is we'll see these bronze drivers and then the gold drivers. And oftentimes the gold drivers can sometimes take a later stint and they'll be able to work their way back up through the field, while the bronze driver is able to pick away at the field early on in the race. And that actually usually works out pretty well. Aren't we seeing something similar happening here with Kurt Krum, do you think?
I think so, potentially now. But the thing is, anything can happen still. Under 40 minutes to go on the racetrack, he falls back to 5th for now. And based on how drivers have been doing this now, we might see everyone else in front of him still have to come in, possibly. But still, there are just a grand total of 5 drivers, 4 laps down, with a chance to try and get the victory still, pending trouble on the racetrack for the Porsches in the race today.
That is true. There is still a good bit of position swap that can be done within the 38 or so minutes we've got left in the race. And of course, overall, we only have 2 cars on the lead lap now, and they're a good half a track away from each other pretty much at this point in time as well. So I think it's safe to say that unless Graphite Racing really has big troubles, they've got this race all sewn up, and they're going to be in a very comfortable spot right through to the end. Kurt Krum, he's going to be trying to work his way up to Enigma ClubSport Porsche, who has just entered the Andretti Hairpin now. Will that gap be able to close down at all? Can Krum find a way to get towards that number 193?
Indeed, you move over to 4th now, and back to 11th rather on the racetrack. As why don't we go to RaceSpot Fan Immersion? Let's follow along with the driver you see right now in the center of your screen, German Sim Racing Blue GTFX. Pardon me, that is Real Pixel Motorsport that overruns the corner and is trying to gain an extra spot. We'll see how he manages his way around the racetrack. You're watching RaceSpotTV for the ClubSport Series Round 2 at Laguna Seca. Welcome back, everyone, to RaceSpotTV. As you can see, our RaceSpot fan immersion ends off with the tone of the race today. Another spin out of turn 11. Marcel Mercel losing control, going side by side in the battle for position with German Sim Racing Blue.
And that was a fight that was further down the field, of course, in your Porsche class, but another case of just a driver trying to get on the throttle way too early before the car was fully settled into how the next little bit would work out, and sent him clean around. So very unfortunate for that driver. I feel like with how he closed in, if he could really put the power down over this next little while, he might be able to make his way back up there and have that fight keep going.
And these cars, as you see, still trying to fight on despite the mistake. They're going to have to deal with Jacob Toffs, who is just absolutely totaled the wall and can't get to the pits. He just came clean across the racetrack at a turn in the entrance of turn 11 after demolishing his car. Nearly had trouble getting to the pits.
That car is absolutely destroyed, and it was from a head-on impact into the wall. On the exit turn 10, we had another Radical that was off in turn 9 as well. That was that second place that actually went off there in turn 9 as well.
Remember, there are two WR racing machines. That, as you see, the 9th overall driver in the MX-5 class was the one stopped there. That was the other WR racing machine that was stopped, but you can see Toffs. I have to get to the pits. He can't get to the pits with where he's at cleanly unless there's no space. The second he's seen space, he just tried to try and floor it. It took him at least 20, 30 seconds to get in there.
And we have had more trouble again at turn 11, this time with your second place driver, Martin Green, trying to get around the Porsche of German Disaster Racing. Big collision and a stack up exiting turn number 11 sent Jens Lehmann right around.
Let's see what caused this one this time. As you see there, coming into turn 11, from the left rear, over top now.
And just turns in, gets loose, and just everybody just ran into each other, and that's a German Disaster around after being in a little bit of a sandwich. And of course, another Radical having to scramble for a tighter line, trying to work their way through. So another incident, this time that was with the other WR racing machine.
And the madness continues. As you see, that was the B machine that fell to now 52 seconds back to Graphite Racing. And if you're Richard Bell, what do you think you and your teammates are probably telling you at this point, knowing that you could potentially lap the entire field, a similar situation to what happened at Daytona? All you have to do is keep the 4 tires on the track, buddy.
That is true. That's the only really thing they have to do at this point. Keep all 4 tires pointed in the direction of the racetrack, and he's going to be all fine and dandy, ready to go. I know he might want to go and try to lap the whole field, but if I were to give him advice, I would say don't try to lap the whole field. Just get a nice rhythm. He does not need to push right now. It is not necessary for him to push. He just needs to find a nice, slow rhythm to settle into, and he'll be all fine and dandy. I feel like even at this point, he could lose over a second a lap to second place. They still would be a good 20 seconds back at the start-finish line when they caught him by the end.
And he nearly caught the back of, that was the main WR Racing entry that Graphite Racing had to check up on the exit of turn 11 for, and lost him a little bit extra time. Remember, Christensen is behind the wheel for that machine in 17, as now he tries to work with the interclass traffic. And we've seen this a lot actually today. A lot of interclass traffic. Sometimes the drivers have been able to get by easily. Other times, though, it's scraps like this. And as well, scraps for 4th, where Enigma's trying to deal with the dive bomb. He's going to dive bombshell, putting in a bombshell of a dive bomb.
Kirk Crum finally making it done. We were talking earlier about how it wasn't possible for Kirk Crum to work his way up to Enigma ClubSport, and well, that answers your question right there. The answer is yes, he can work his way out there and he can fight for the position. He has just taken 4th place in the class, allowing him up and into the lead. He's going to have a couple of Miatas up ahead of him to deal with here in just a little bit. He should be able to get by them all nice and clean.
And you might be able to use them as picks too. That might be able to secure him some extra time if he can get him at the right spot. Crum works his way up the hill. That is now Danny Fonte Pedro behind the wheel for the junior entry for World of Sim Racing, who lets him on by. and he hits him in the right spot. Out of the corkscrew exit, gets enough insurance and then some to be able to use him as a parachute, in fact.
Indeed, and that slowed Enigma Club Sport right up as they hop over the sausage curb, slightly unsettling their car after going around Denny Fonte Pedra, who's going to pull it down onto pit lane, most likely for their final scheduled pit stop of the day.
And Torque Freak Racing Maggots also came in. Phil Roberts stays behind the wheel for their car, as that will not be a driver swap in their situation. Crum, meanwhile, though, up to 2.2 seconds. That is in part because of where they reached that World of Sim Racing Junior car. They passed them by before the corkscrew. The driver that was trying to pass them was stuck behind them, threw up the exit of the corkscrew all the way through turn 9 and couldn't get by until turn 2 and 10. That's how big of a difference there is in speeds.
Well, absolutely, and just the fact as well that they had to check up, Enigma Club Sport had to check up so badly as well in turn number 9, because that's, again, one of those corners where there really only is one line through. You take any other line, you're just going to spin out, or you're going to go spearing off the other end of the corner, and he had to fall in line and check up so hard for that Miata. It put him so far back, which allowed Kirk Crum to absolutely tear away with 4th place, and he's going to have himself in a very, very comfortable position now.
And Enigma's still in the 5th spot, mind you, and trying to gain back said time. And we've seen, though, once you get clean air, they're in a better position. The driver behind has actually been able to gain a lot of said time, whether it's through getting some tow and or being the better driver to work the way through said corners.
And it is true, and again, we're going to go back to driver personalities and how they could play a big factor into how these races can play out and how the positions can change overall through stints. That's one of the factors what I really like about these series, where the drivers do have to kind of change around. They have to change seats because it allows you to get multiple personalities into one car in one race, which is actually quite fascinating to see, because you can see positions change so drastically, as you can see on and off throughout this race.
Still looking at the gap that's currently distanced about 10 car lengths, give or take, make it now 15 as they work their way now towards turn number 5. But we have a stop-and-go penalty issued on the racetrack just now. Nibble Racing has been given a stop-and-go for a collision that was on lap 79 for turn number 9. Remember, that was in that situation, essentially, for Nibble Racing, where they had some trouble with Bartol, I believe it was.
Now, well, more calamity going on, it would seem, and Nibble Racing having to pay the price once more.
And that was that contact. Remember that contact? You've seen significant damage to that Bombshell Motorsports 286? That was where that damage came from, I think, Nolan. In fact, yes, in fact it was, and why he was just given a stop and go.
Well, there you have it. That's all we really need to know about the situation. Ross Bartel, unfortunately, having to suffer at the hands of yet another collision over there in turn number 9, 1 lap ago. Actually, this was several laps ago, excuse me, 5 laps ago. Yeah,
that was that incident where you mentioned it, we were talking about it, seeing the pit stop come in right afterwards, 2 for them, and Snowball for Bombshell in the 286. But Nibble currently having to serve a stop and go as the only driver a lap down in 3rd in the class. They're going to serve it right now as they reach double wide traffic. This could potentially move them out of a podium spot if they sit too long. But the bright side is, though, Sork Racing Orange 2 laps down on the other side of the racetrack.
I feel like if they serve that penalty correctly, they'll be able to stay out there and still be able to keep their podium spot. Actually, it was probably a good idea that Bartel came down to serve that penalty immediately, because he did have both a Miata and a Porsche out in front of him as well that he would have had to work his way around. So that was probably a good idea that he had to do that instead of trying to work through 2 different classes of lap traffic at the same time. So good on Bartel for making that call to bring it down. 27 seconds lost in the pit lane overall.
Couple more cars in the pit lane, though. LTP Racing, Matthew Richardson coming out and back after jumping back in the driver's seat for the MX-5s. Thomas Grendel into the car for Team Vikings Valhall. Pardon me, sitting in the pit stall, rather. Now for his pit stop, he was one of the 4 drivers in front of Bombshell Motorsports in the class that still need to pit for the Porsches. As you see, the LTP Racing MX-5 coming out in the top 5. One of 2 drivers a lap down in the class compared to the rest of the leaders on the class.
And LTP Racing, of course, one of those drivers that has seen a couple of incidents in the race as well. They're also just trying to limp that car around to just manage to get it home all nice and clean without hopefully picking up any more incidents as it is. They are going to have to let Real Pixel Motorsport through directly behind him. And we are getting into the final 25 minutes of the race, so how are things going to change? Will the mood at all change? Are drivers going to start being more aggressive for position? We've actually seen a good portion of the drivers around the track have honestly been split up to the point where I feel like some of the gaps are as far as 40 seconds apart from each other in your Radical field as well.
Enigma's come in and out of the pits with a new driver behind the wheel. Miguel Ayala has jumped into the behind the wheel for the final 24 minutes and 17 seconds. How time flies in this race for what was essentially a 2-hour and 25-minute race. They're right now in 7th on the racetrack with a brand new driver behind the wheel and right in the battle with German Disaster Racing.
This could get interesting here. Again, going back to our point about how these little personalities could change how things work here on the track. There's German Disaster Racing making a look at the turn number 6. Not going to go for it just yet. A little bit of a slide, though, from ClubSport going into the corner as well, it would seem.
They head now into the corkscrew. Let's see how they shuffle through this. Ross Bartol is behind them as well. That can break this on up. Lehman moves on towards an inside line, nearly runs him over. Has to go into the sand in the checkup.
And we have received another penalty, we've seen, for the number 18 for unavoidable contact as well. So we are not sure when that happened. That was most likely one of our other spins that occurred around the same time. That
was just 8 laps ago, actually, for the penalty. That was with the, remember the WB Racing B entry? I think we were discussing that on the exit of turn 11 when you mentioned they made some contact. At the same time, we were showing that first replay that spun around that German Disaster Racing car. That's how that penalty came to be. So now Martin Green given a penalty on the racetrack.
And so the penalties are beginning to stack up more and more. Keeping eyes on this battle, though, can German Disaster Racing find a way to work his way back up to Enigma ClubSport and make that move for that position on Miguel Ayala? We, of course, have WR Racing in their beat-up machine trying to work their way through this battle as well. So, can Enigma ClubSport try to use that Radical as a bit of a pick here, or maybe can German Disaster Racing find a good time to get Miguel Ayala out of the way using the Radical, do you think?
Well, we've seen it already a couple times. We'll see if it's done this time. Christensen is the driver between the 2 cars for position. Much faster speed, of course. Down the hill they go. This time, Christensen takes the higher line. Ayala ducks on in. The thing is, the difference isn't as drastic as with the MX-5s we've seen throughout the day today. It's about a 20-second difference between the prototypes and the MX-5s. Between these cars, it's been about 5 seconds, give or take, on average between the mid-pack cars and the lead cars in the class as they go 3 wide. Christensen gets on by. Ayala can't use Wilhout now as a pick, as Lehman will late break his way back towards the back bumper.
Still hovering within that second gap. Miguel Ayala still going to try to be putting on the power. And of course, Jens Lehmann right behind are going to be trying to pile on the pressure to make something work as well. And then, of course, you got to remember that we have Fisher Motorsport and Manuel Meyer back there as well, who's looking to join this party as well.
NAB Racing in and out of the pits now. They keep their same driver. Shane Cameron also coming in. NAB Racing, though, came out still in the race lead. And watch where Bombshell is. They're in the back bumper still, coming into the entrance of the corner while NAB comes out of it. So NAB Racing has made the overcut work.
And that is how you make an overcut work right there. We've had a position change as Miguel Ayala has gone off the circuit at turn number 6, running a little wide after another power slide through turn number 6. That has allowed German Disaster Racing through. And now Fisher Motorsport is trying to make something work on Enigma ClubSport as well.
And Mayer trying to poke his way on by after the mistake. Ayala taking a bit of a more softer touch to the corner to avoid the curves. Was full on board as Mayer dives it in, pokes it in, makes it work, bounces off the sausages for a split second, but still gets the pass to work.
Meyer being very, very aggressive in turn number 11, and that is exactly what he needed to do. A little bit of a wiggle on the exit as well. Manages to keep the car under control, and he's going to be hunting down German Disaster Racing now. And this is, of course, going to be for 7th place in class as well. Sorry, 6th place in class, actually, that these drivers are going to be fighting for in a few moments here, it would seem.
Ayala falling all the way back to 8th, and you've seen how much time he's been losing now in the past lap. First with the mistake, second with getting basically squeezed off the racing line that we see a lot in Formula One racing, and now having to work his way. Fisher Motorsport, though, they've got a clean race car. They've got a fast race car. The question is, can they find the right place to do anything? As Matthew Richardson moved to the right side, out of the way of the two drivers for position, as now Mayer tries to poke his way on by. Aggressive braking from Ayala keeps him in the line behind, but they still are close at hand. Lehman still having the upper hand in terms of position.
And then, of course, you've got Carter Kundinger for SK Motorsports, who's closing the gap as well. He's just trying to make his way past Michael Ayala as well. Could that have an effect on how this battle could play out? Meyer trying to drive it in, doesn't get it work. He's going to try to get a drive off here. He's going to make it work. Beautiful exit from Manuel Meyer for Fisher Motorsport to make it work. Oh, so close. They come to the start-finish line. Here comes SK Motorsports by. German Disaster Racing checks up to avoid turning Fisher Motorsport off the circuit, and that will be 6th place in class for Manuel Meyer.
And that time he also squeezed him off the racing line there too. That time nearly squished him into the dirt. He did, and that pushes Lehman all the way back to where Ayala is all of a sudden. So two aggressive passes, whether it was through the exit of turn 11 or coming through turn number 1 that time for Fisher Motorsport, that moves them up 2 spots in 2 laps.
So that clearly shows that Manuel Meyer clearly has an extremely fast race car with a fast driver commanding the wheel of that race car. I wonder if they're being more aggressive because they got a bit more life left on their tires. Maybe a bit more fuel left in the tanks as well. Fight for your lead in the Porsche class.
And it's gone down to 0.4 of a second. Remember, they were spread out by about at least 15 car lengths when Nab Racing came out of the pits. Now it's down to just a few tenths of a second. Can Frank Van Brandwick hold on towards Kurt Krum? Krum has led a majority of the race today for the class. They'll reach once again Matthew Richardson as he moves to the left side. Van Brandwick still keeping up that racing line. Krum, though, has shown the better speed. Now Racing, though, has the different strategy where they went for the overcut.
And Nab Racing running off just a little bit in turn number 10, allowing Krum to close in all that much more. Krum, of course, pushing for the lead now in the Porsche class. He's got victory in his sights in the final 17 minutes of this race. Can he make something work on Nab Racing coming to turn number 1? No, he's going to have to wait just a little bit longer. It's only a matter of time, though. Lockup from Frank Van Brandwick as well on the entry of that Andretti hairpin turn as they come down for turn number 3 once more, and Kurt Krum holds position.
Still a ways to go. Estimated under 12 laps to go for the Porsches. Better exit that time. Here comes Krum on the right side. He tries to dive it on into the outside. They make contact. Both the Porsche leaders spin. Van Brandwick keeps it straight. Krum has to turn it back around. Van Brandwick is off into the sand once more as both drivers have the trouble.
And that could affect the lead as well by a ton. Both cars have got big damage on their cars now. Krum on the left and Frank Van Brandwick on the right. How will that affect things? That was just a completely clumsy move from Kurt Krum, trying to go for a lead on the outside, turned in and slammed Nab Racing right in the door.
Let's look above, as that was another case where there was a locked brake. That time it looks like on the left front. That caused the swing hard to the left for Bombshell Motorsports. They're now back by 10 car lengths once more. Let's take a look at it one more time.
Yeah, it was a case of Kurt Crum locked up just a tiny bit, and that caused the car to get so unsettled, and it sent both drivers off. Somehow Frank van Brandwijk managing to hold on to the lead through all that. The question is, can Gold Racing Team White capitalize on this situation? He's just exiting out of turn 11. Can he capitalize on the damage that both of these cars have now? Could we have a 3-car fight for the lead?
And remember, that NAB racing machine was a part of that wreck with German disaster racing that happened out of turn 3 at least 20 laps ago that we've seen when there were drivers going 3 wide. And now they're going to have to try and hope that with now even more damage compounded onto that, they can find some way to hold on with 10.5 laps around the track estimated to go.
They've been doing a very good job so far on the defense, but Kurt Crum is also very, very good on offense. So you've got two very skilled drivers in very fast cars who are both using very different methods trying to keep each other at bay or get around each other if you are Kurt Crum. So this could create for a really exciting final few minutes of this race. The gap is closed now to within 4/10 now, half a second now, as Frank van Brandwijk runs just a tad wide at turn number 9. Little bit of the back end stepping out on the entrance to turn number 10. That will allow Kurt Crum to close it once more in turn number 11. And here is Bombshell Motorsports in that Miata that is holding up Frank van Brandwijk on the exit of turn 11.
And teammates potentially helping each other a little bit there. That allows the better exit for Crum. He'll back it up, though, this time. Actually goes into the concrete part of the corner, actually. Van Brandwijk, though, still smoking up those tires with the damage that he's dealing with as they lap World of Sim Racing Team Junior once more on the circuit. Distance between the two once more, 2.5 car lengths. About half a second between them and victory at this point. Under 14 minutes to go.
And of course, Kurt Crum still slowly closing the gap. Round 2 is about to get heated up here. Here he goes. Will he try to make a move in turn 6? He's going to get back in line for now. If he can capitalize on an exit here, he can make something in the run-up up to the corkscrew. Could we potentially see a pass here? The gap is slowly closing as they run up the hill. Crum's going to get back in line. He's going to have to wait to make something on the exit of turn number 10. There's just nothing he can do when he's trying to go for a position in turn 9.
They nearly touch bumpers once more. Van Brandwijk having a look on behind, having to take a wider exit compared to Crum. Going down to turn 10, Van Brandwijk holds up Crum on the corner exit. Can Crum dive it in, though? Decides not to. They both take the high line, thinking up the strategy. We'll see if they can get the drag. Heading towards the Andretti hairpin now. Crum falls in the tire tracks.
Kurt Crum is being very, very patient here. He recognizes that he can get Frank van Brandwijk eventually. He's just got to wait for a gap to open up here as there's a big lockup from Brandwijk on the entrance to the Andretti hairpin. Now, Kurt Crum has just got to wait a little bit for that little window to open. And when that window opens, I can guarantee you he's going to make a dive for it.
Still 12 minutes even to go on the clock. Van Brandwijk continues to struggle in the corner exits with the damage. Crum trying to take advantage. They made contact here last time they were side by side. They can't get side by side this time. Martin Green about to try and break things up. Coming in as lap traffic. That is again second overall for the prototype class. Crum, though, doesn't get the stronger one this time at a turn 6 as they lap Dirk Fetterman onto the right, who moves to the right side.
I don't think these Radicals are going to be moving us. I don't think these Porsches are going to be moving aside too quickly to let Martin Green by, because they are fighting for position with coming up to 10 minutes left in a 2-hour, 25-minute race. So these two guys, they're going to be fighting all out now. So I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to wait until that straightaway to let that Radical through, if he can even get there. Because if I were these guys, I would most likely would not let that Radical through, who actually pulls down onto pit lane. So second place overall once more down onto the lane. Kurt Crum having to swerve to avoid Matthias Goldiger in the Miata. Can he make something work? He's definitely in the draft. Can he go for a dive bomb in the Andretti hairpin? Looks to the outside, still not quite there. Is he going to go for an over-under? He is, because he's there, and that will prevent him from going for the undercut in the corner.
Can't make the move. A defensive line forces Crum towards the outside line. Still can't get side by side with Van Brandwyck once more. Now they have to deal with Philip Roberts on the corner exit. This could be trouble for Van Brandwyck. He bobbles off the corner. Crum tries to duck to the inside. He's now to the left rear quarter panel. They're near side by side, working their way through turn 5. Crum gets the better exit once more. Van Brandwyck, though, able to get the better launch.
This is fantastic race between the two of your Porsche leaders here. Frank Van Brandwyck clears him on the outside before turn 6. Crum managing to duck back in line. Good idea not to go side by side. It's turn number 6, guys. That is only going into disaster for both of you. Bumper to bumper through the corkscrew for the 92nd time today for both of these drivers. In through turn number 9 now. The gap has separated. Crum looking to get a good drive off of 9, 10, and 11 to get that jump on him going back into the Andretti hairpin.
Some of the prototypes still ducking into the pits. The action, though, we stick here as these drivers continue to duel it on out for the class lead. Crum, this time, not as strong of a corner exit. Van Brandwyck actually locked it up a slight touch and still carrying more speed off the corner exit. Here comes the troll, though, from Crum. He looks on board. Back to the defensive line goes Van Brandwyck. Going to the outside, though, Crum trying to get the switch back. Can't get underneath once more as he ducks his way nearly towards the left side. Still can't get the pass done. It looks like he knows where he wants it done. The thing is, Van Brandwyck has been able to defend every single move so far.
Something's got to give here. I'm beginning to fear the worst for both of these drivers as the clock begins to tick away. Every second means Crum has less and less time to make that move on Frank Van Brandwyck. He's going to be getting more and more desperate as the laps slowly tick away. There's not much time left to make a move. I feel like this is going to end with one, if not both of them, in a barrier somewhere on the racetrack. And I am just praying that they will have the sense to keep the fight up, but to not crash each other out of the race because of it.
They're going to have to deal with Sork Racing Orange. They came right out of the pits, right into the midst of this battle with the prototype. That is right behind them. Van Brandwyck, higher entry this time compared to Crum. Crum better launch as he runs off into the curves. The prototype heads into the dirt. Now, they don't have to deal with the prototype quite yet. Van Brandwyck, though, locks it up. Crum takes the better exit. They're going to be side by side to the stripe. Still 8 minutes to work with. Crum with the better run. MX-5 comes down the racetrack through 1. Van Brandwyck tries to defend. He tries to go for the cross. Can he get underneath? No, he cannot. To the race lead, Kurt Crum.
Can Kurt Crum hold on to the lead is the question now. Frank Brandwyck driving in, and they're both going to go around.
And that time going way too strong on the brakes, locking it up is Van Brandwyck and collects both the lead cars. They're still struggling to get going. Kevin Enderman having to check up and getting some near damage in that situation. But Kurt Crum still holds on for now. And everything has just gone to calamity mode.
I called it. You cannot say I didn't. I knew something like this is going to happen. One of them was going to drive it in, and it was going to result in a crash. And that is exactly what happened. Brandwyck got desperate. He tried to drive it in hard and needed Crum to go for the position, and it did not work out nearly the way he thought that was going to go. I could see that coming a mile off, and that is exactly what happened.
And you look from Van Brandwyck as he spins around, severe damage to the right side as well, as he got hit by that prototype, stopping in the middle of the racetrack. And that said damage might mean race over for Van Brandwyck now because of that incident.
Now the big question is, eyes are going to turn to Jeffrey Garzado for Gold Racing Team White, who has sights on Frank Van Brandwyck. Can he go for third place? Because he's just exiting turn 11 now. He's in a fight, battle for fourth place as well in class as well. So this is a fight for the podium spot in your class. Thomas Grendel for Team Vikings trying to go for third place. Can one of them make their way up to second place now to take away from Nab Racing?
It's the closest battle on the track at the moment. Inside goes Grendel as he moves up to third. And these two have the cleanest cars on the racetrack. Crum's got some severe damage all over the left side of his car. Van Brandwyck, severe damage everywhere else on the race car. So now it's to the question. You got 6 minutes even left on the clock. If you're Grendel and Garzado, what's going through your minds knowing that you got the freshest cars left on the racetrack in your class?
I think they're just, I don't even think they're worried about that. I think they're just trying to focus on each other at this point. For all I know, they might not even know about what happened with the 2 leaders up front. Brandwick goes off at turn 6, manages to get it back onto the circuit, and that allows Grendel to close in just a little bit. And we got one car off in the background as well. It is Florian Hein for German Sim Racing.
That is the Friends entry, and not looking friendly as that front bumper in terms of how being friendly to drive. You look here, coming out of turn 6, hooks straight to the left, destroys the car, and the 15th in class team continues to have a rough day.
Moving back up to look at Thomas Grendel, just lapping Jacob Lehman with Jeffrey Garzado. It is looking like Grendel does have the faster car. The question is that car fast enough to catch and overtake Frank van Brandwick, who has been really, really aggressive on defense? There's less than 5 minutes left in the race. There is not enough time. There is going to be enough time, I feel like, to get this battle going again. Thomas Grendel has got to hit his marks. He's got to get every apex perfect if he's going to be able to take away second place.
But the R-Classes Graphite Racing leads by an entire lap, lapping the entire field. World Sim Racing Team's David Del Rio leads by a whole lap for their class. So the action still shuffles the way to those Porsches, because while Crum was faster last time by, Van Brandwick falling off for their class. As you look at those cars, Crum works his way through the traffic. Now, it's the matter of, is there enough time for everyone else for this Porsche class? Once more, as talked about, 3rd and 4th, they're separated by 9/10 of a second, but they are a second faster at least compared to Van Brandwick now.
I definitely don't think there's enough time for them to be able to take Kurt Crum. I think Crum has got this race for the Porsche class all wrapped up. He's just got to keep it on the track, and he will be home free. Brandwick, not so much.
SK Motorsports lost control going into turn 10. They're back on the racetrack. We still shuffle over towards this battle still. We'll see if they can get a draft this time, working down the front stretch through turn number 1. Still a couple more times around the racetrack for them. Grendel, still the faster car. Granzato, still trying to catch on back up. Locking up the brakes, and through the dust goes Grendel. But once more, Grendel showing the muscles in this late going. Van Brandwick, though, is now having to deal with them under 10 car lengths back.
Grendel has got a target painted on the back of Frank van Brandwick's car. He's got his eyes locked on it, and he says, I'm coming for that second place. You better get ready to defend, because I am coming hard. And he is going to be trying to drive it in at every chance he got. Less than 3 minutes remaining. I'd guess about 2 or 3 laps at the very most for Thomas Grendel to be able to work something out here. Does he have the time to make something work and go for that second podium spot?
We'll have to see, because Van Brandwick's been struggling a lot on the corner exits. You look at the center screen, the car at the back of the train in Granzato. This time keeps it about even. Van Brandwick, though, having to let the car roll down the hill, in fact, as he continues to back up the corners. Grendel catching on up towards the back bumper, as now it's down to 5 car lengths between each of the cars in the middle of your screen. Right now in front, Van Brandwick once again for 3rd in the class. Grendel 4th. Granzato in 5th. Pardon me, 2nd, 3rd, 4th rather, on the racetrack.
Grendel's going to have to make something work on this lap or the next one. He's going to have about 2 laps left to go. Brandwick once more locking up big time coming into the corner. Can Jeffrey Garzado make something work? Can he go for that last podium spot? Every driver in this 3-car train is going to be looking for positions to make up or to defend against, and Grendel is stuck right in the middle. He hasn't really increased that gap to the car behind him at all, but he's definitely closing in the gap to second place.
1 minute and 30 seconds left on the clock. Who will come away with the victories? Who will come away with the best spots? Graphite Racing currently working their way through the back half of the racetrack. They will get the white flag potentially this time by, and they've lost the control. Trouble for Richard Bell. Richard Bell has lost control. He still has a 1-lap lead in the class. However, he nearly just threw away the race right there.
And that would have thrown everything up into the wind, allowing WR Racing B to get back into the lead. That would have been massive if Bell had continued to lose control. Thankfully, no suspension damage on the underside of that Radical. The gap continues to close in your fight for second place in your Porsche field.
And that means this will potentially be that white flag lap, as that will slow down enough pace for that set's opportunity. Van Brandwick, though, slower down on the pace. Grandel trying to keep on up. They're going to have to deal with Ross Bartow inside. He dives on in with SK Motorsports. Both of them try and break it up. Gold Racing Team losing time. Van Brandwick, much better exit. He'll dive to the inside of Gold Racing Team's Miata, as they'll be used as a pick. Van Brandwick gaining a lot of time that time, coming out of the Andretti hairpin compared to the rest of his competitors as they shuffle on behind. Again, that was not for position for the prototypes, as they had to let by the prototypes this time. And a white flag about to come out on the racetrack. And it is indeed out the final lap here at Laguna Seca in what has been a dramatic and crash-filled and wild race today. The battle still for the class in second for the Porsches, still having to be worked with. The overall race leader catching up and quick behind them at the top of the corkscrew. The battle going down the corkscrew. Grandel and Van Brandwick will have an extra lap to sort things out themselves, but for today, Richard Bell and Graphite Racing have only a couple more turns to get around. They were in second majority of the time. They went back and forth with Frank Osterels behind the wheel trying to take the lead and getting by Sim RCDE Strawberry. But it came down to attrition and mistakes. Richard Bell will take the overall race win and the prototype class win for Graphite Racing here in Laguna Seca, as a position battle has made a swap. Van Brandwick has lost 2 spots on the exit of turn 11.
Brandwick ran super wide off the exit and got really loose. That caused a lose out to both Jeffrey Garzado and Thomas Grendel.
We'll quickly take a look at the replay on how that happened. Van Brandwick, remember, was in front of Team Vikings and then hits the dirt there. Diving to the inside, Team Vikings to take away the defensive line. Forces the wide line for a car that's been struggling the brakes. Hits the curbs as well. Loses them 2 positions and in turn drops them off the podium. But meanwhile, let's shift our focus to the leaders for the MX-5s real quick, because currently the world of sim racing working its way through the final quarters themselves. They were a part of some of the quickest laps today. They'll lap the field by 1 total lap today after trouble for Torque Freak Racing when they were in front. But for today, it will be the victors of the day. World of Sim Racing comes away with the victory in the MX-5s to win their class. And quickly behind them, Kurt Crum will cross the line himself for Bombshell Motorsports. And he as well will come away with a class victory himself. That position battle finishes off with Team Vikings in front of Jeffrey Granzato with Gold Racing Team for that battle that was shuffling around for second in the class. That was within the top 10 overall. And all you can say is the drivers continue to cycle the way around and either stop on the racetrack and or finish up the rest of their laps. What a day.
Wow. That was an exciting final 20 minutes of the race, if I had to say so myself. That was once again, incredible racing right at the end of the race, just like we saw at Daytona.
Let's look at your race results as Burnout City happens for Graphite Racing. Graphite Racing coming away with the top step of the podium today in the prototypes, winning with Richard Bell behind the wheel to take their first checker flag of the season. Coming away in the second spot, WR Racing B, as they were a lap behind with Nibble Racing recovering to a 3rd place finish after the stop and go. Sork Racing Orange came away 4th with V Apex Racing Group Blue in the top 5. SK Motorsports came away 6th overall in the class. And then you have a string of various drivers that break up the group to where the rest of the prototypes are today. WR Racing finished off 7th over in the class with SimRCDE Strawberry, the Apex Racing Group Purple, rounding out the 9 drivers a part of that class here today for the prototypes. For the Porsches, it was Bombshell Motorsports coming away with the victory in dramatic fashion. Multiple spins on their way towards the top step of the podium today, but Team Vikings coming away with the 2nd place finish after a pass coming towards the white flag, getting by both Gold Racing Team White and NAB Racing amongst the final few minutes. Slow Racing Team came away with the top 5 of the class with Fisher Motorsport, Fisher in 6th. 7th, German Disaster, Enigma in 8th, Real Pixel in 9th, and Huge S Gold rounding out the top 10 of the class. Some of the other drivers involved in the class included Torque Freak Racing Avon Rise 7 laps down, Real Pixel Motorsport finished off in 12th, while German Sim Racing Blue 13th. 14th, it was a rough one for SimSport by iZone Black, coming away in the 20th spot overall today. Huge S Blue along with Porsche Basel of Sork Rennsport Esports, along with German Sim Racing White and Racecraft Esports rounding out the drivers today. The bottom two did not make the starts today. And meanwhile, for the MX-5s, it was World of Sim Racing Team having the cleanest race out of the top runners today, coming away with the top step of the podium. They came away one lap ahead of Torque Freak Racing Maggots after they had early race troubles when they were up in front. Gold Racing Team finishes off in the top 3. They have a lot to celebrate in terms of burnouts. Meanwhile, 4th, the junior squad for the World of Sim Racing came away 4th, with LTP Racing in the top 5, Real Pixel Motorsport, Bombshell Motorsports, Ava Verbatic, along with SimSport News Racing powered by iZone Green, and Team Viking Sleipner, rounding out some of the drivers amongst the drivers finishing. DNFs in the class include GM Tempo Racing, Disabled Motorsport, and the drivers that did not start, German Sim Racing, Orange BL Racing, and 7 stars fast today. As you can see, a very dramatic race today, and right now, a lot of drivers with a lot to say for themselves, that's for sure in this one. Let's bring in Eric Mick into the cockpit, coming away with the Porsche class win today for with Bombshell Motorsports. How are you feeling today after what was a dramatic race, to say the very, very, very least?
I mean, I feel relief. I feel really great that we were able to pull this off. Yeah, that was a messy race out there, but we just tried to keep everything clean. We had some issues with that racing for the lead at the end, but I think everybody kind of knew what the deal was there.
Yeah, talk about your perspective. Of course, you weren't behind the cockpit for the final stint. However, it was a very tight battle going on, watching as Kurt Crum was fighting with NAB Racing to try and get the class victory today.
Yeah, it was tense, and we felt like he had the pace advantage, so he was just being patient, just waiting for an opportunity. He thought he had one there, and it just pushed it just that little bit too much, too hard, and caused that incident there. But we made sure not to take the lead from that, and just to get the car back under control. And from there, it was all about making sure if we got a chance to take the lead again, it was going to be as clean as possible, because we don't want to win that way. We don't want to race that way. And then I think it kind of evened out when he got in too deep behind us after we got by him and spun us. But thankfully, we both had a large enough lead on the rest of the field that at least at that point, we kept the top 2.
I'm going to ask real quick. I'm guessing in both of those cases, it was just as simple as racing incident, correct? Yes?
That's how I would view both of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
It was just trying to push that little bit too hard to get the lead there, knowing that we were running out of time.
But of course, in this race, there was a lot of traffic to deal with that we've seen all day long. How difficult was it to deal with so much traffic coming through, especially with the prototypes, with how this track was? I don't think either of us here in the broadcast booth expected to be as difficult as it was today in traffic.
No, there's a lot of discussion about some of the driving standards that went on in this race, and I know there's a lot of people feeling that radicals were kind of all over the place and taking unnecessary risks for getting by lapped cars. So at a certain point, when we kind of had an idea of what the type of race this was going to be, we were just trying to be extremely careful while also running the best lap times that we could. But more importantly, just not losing time by getting involved in a wreck, spending time sideways or anything like that. We didn't want to have to spend time getting anything repaired in pit lane. So from very early on, that was the goal, to keep everything clean. This is not my favorite car. This is one of my worst tracks, so my stint was all about minimizing how long I had to be in the car, and keeping it in good enough condition that Kurt could get out there and do what he does.
Indeed. Next round goes to Silverstone. What are your team's thoughts heading into the UK for March?
Well, it's a little bit interesting because I think we're running the international circuit and not the full circuit. So I don't really have all that much experience on that layout. So having to relearn that layout and figure out the car around there. Again, it's not one of my best tracks in GT cars, so be having to put some work in for that one. And yeah, I don't know. Hopefully we can continue the podium run here and set ourselves up in the championship nicely after the next one.
Real quickly, anyone you want to thank before we let you go?
Throw a thank out there to SimTV for their logos on the car this week. I know you guys don't have the paint coated, but we do have one. My brother Andrew, who drove the 286 Mazda, he's the one who paints our cars, so we'll make sure we get that on the broadcast next time.
Indeed, thank you very much, and congratulations on the class victory today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for covering the race. You guys do a great job.
And once again, that was Eric Mick coming away as part of the winning team for the Porsche class here today. Meanwhile, let's bring in your overall race winner. Standing by with Nolan, it's Graphite Racing's Frank Osterhaus, who did the first stint for the team. Nolan?
First of all, congratulations to you, Frank, on the win for you guys and Richard Bell. I know this is going to be a very big day for you guys at Graphite Racing after what was such a close race last week at Daytona.
Hello?
And we might be having a couple technical issues. So, Frank, I'm going to try this again. Frank, first off, congratulations on the race win for you guys at Graphite Racing. I know that this is probably going to be a very big day for you guys after the race at Daytona last week. How has kind of the mindset changed from the race at Daytona over to the race here at WeatherTech Raceway today?
We didn't expect to win here. But we had a really good race. And we kept it clean mostly. We had a couple of incidents, but mostly we didn't pick up any damage. I guess that's how we won, I guess.
And then, of course, we did see SimRC.de Strawberry had been in the lead for a good portion of the early stages of the race. And then, of course, you picked up the lead after they were collected in a big incident at turn number 5. What were the thoughts going through your guys' minds when you heard that you were going to be picking up the lead because of a crash?
Well, it's more fun to win in a direct fight, but we'll take it.
I think that a lot of drivers they'd probably feel the same way about you. And you, of course, did come away and take a fantastic win once more, picking up one spot from where you started at the start of this race. It's definitely a strong way to start the season. 2 podium finishes back-to-back, a second place in race 1 and a second place here today at WeatherTech Raceway. Before we let you go, are there any sponsors you'd like to shout out for us today?
Not really, they're all in the car, so there's plenty of coverage, I think.
Awesome, and thank you so much for joining us today, Frank. And once again, congratulations on the win for Graphite Racing.
Do you have any idea how the standings are?
And of course, with the standings that are going to be happening, you are going to be, of course, up to 102 points, I believe, into the standings as of this race.
Nice.
And now we are joined by Jeffrey, driving for GRT Motorsports. I am so sorry. I'm getting myself really flustered here trying to figure out where everything is currently. And of course, you were driving, Mr. Jeffrey. You were driving with Jeffrey Garzado, Ford Gold Team, Gold Racing Team White, coming away with a third-place finish in the Porsche field. That was pretty big. It was a pretty close race between all of you guys right at the end of this race. What were your thoughts? Did you think that given another lap in the race, you would have had the potential to be able to go for another position up to second place?
I mean, I could say that, but if I'm being perfectly honest with myself, I made a lot of little clumsy mistakes throughout the lap. I was being a bit cheap lapping, so I mean, yeah, another lap would have been nice, and I might have been able to catch him, but at the end of the day, I think I actually threw away the second. We're still happy with the podium after our finish last round, though.
And I can imagine you did work your way up 6 spots from the start of this race, and with all the chaos that was going on throughout the entirety of the race, it must feel like quite the accomplishment to be able to come up with such a good result, especially with all the traffic that has been working through. It must have been a fairly chaotic race out there for you guys in the car, having to work your way around lap traffic while having to be lapped by the Radicals yourself.
Yeah, JP was our Jean Felipe was our MPV for sure. He had the difficult part. You know, he had to double stint the tires in the hottest weather with very little rubber on the track and getting around all that traffic. We got lucky. We avoided that carnage at the start. And I want to give a special thanks to my teammate Taj Edwards. He wasn't in the car, but he was working out the pit strategy, and he gave some clear air in the middle of the race. And that way I was able to just put my head down when I came out.
And putting the head down is exactly what you did, managing to overtake Frank Van Brandwyck in 4th place, right near the final lap of the race, coming up to the white flag of the race. Before we let you go celebrate the podium with your team, do you have anybody you'd like to shout out for us here today?
Just my 2 teammates, JP for qualifying the car and doing his job in the first stint, Taj for helping out with the setup and testing, and a special thank you to all the Mazda drivers. The Gold Racing Team Mazda drivers. I'm so glad they actually got to finish the race and on the podium.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This was Jeffrey Garzado, 3rd place in your Porsche field. And now we're going to bring in Philip Roberts, who came away with a 2nd place finish in your Mazda field. Now, Philip, you, of course, had a good race as well, working your way up 4 spots from the start of this race for Torque Freak Racing. How would you say this race went, considering you finished back in 9th place at Daytona?
Yeah, hi guys. Yes, really happy with the race. We started on pole thanks to a great lap from Gianni, but we didn't quite make that last with being lapped. We got taken out in the last corner pretty early on. But yeah, surprised with my pace after I got in the car. Because well, I was off pace all practice, and yeah, being able to hold up with the cars behind was pretty good for me after the.
And of course, a 2nd place finish right on the podium as well. So that is, of course, a much better result than what we saw last week at Daytona. Going into race 3, do you think you can potentially be in contention for going for a race win coming into round number 3?
It's all down to traffic more than anything. I think we're right on pace. Gianni's really fast in this car. Obviously, he's got pole. I can't remember if it was pole last time, but he definitely got pole this time. And we did a good job of holding on to the position we had, and we can definitely fight for the win in some of the races coming forward. And hopefully, this will give us some good championship points to get back into the fight for the championship as well.
Well, I'm going to say I look forward to seeing you guys up there and fighting for that race win. It was very entertaining to see you guys working your way up through the field, especially after what was an extremely chaotic race. Before we let you go, do you have any sponsors you'd like to shout out today? Anybody you'd like to say thanks to?
Yeah, thanks to the whole team, Torque Freak Racing, and good shout out to the other car that missed out on the top 10, only just on the line. And then thanks to Infinity Decals for sponsoring the team.
And thank you as well, Philip Roberts, for joining us in the commentary booth today. We will let you go back to celebrate your 2nd place with the team. And of course, we are going to be closing our broadcast for today as well with race number 3, the 2.4 Hours of Silverstone, coming to you live on March 23rd here on RaceSpotTV for today. Today in the commentary booth, we had Justin Prince and myself, Nolan Rambo. Behind the cameras for us today in the production booth was Hugo Louise. Overly designed credits will go to Andreas Warner, and of course, live timing and scoring brought to you by Nick Thyssen. Thank you so much to all of these guys. And of course, we will talk to all of you next time when we go live for the 2.4 Hours of Silverstone on March the 23rd.